son. Where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
All right, folks, we are back once again. It is the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Thank you for joining. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel, and we greatly appreciate it. Today, we have yet another episode that's been months in the making. I'm super excited to talk to this person. He's an expert of the underworld, and he's really doing the hard work to uncover some of the most sinister aspects of modern life. Please welcome to the show, Gray.
Thank you for having me.
We did it. We've been talking about this for a minute, and now we're finally doing it. Let's start this off to make sure we kind of like highlight what your objective, at least for the past like 10 years of your life, has been. If you could kind of explain what you do with organized safety, what it is, and what your goals for it are, moving into the scary future that we find ourselves heading towards.
Yeah, absolutely. So, organized safety is a platform to where survivors, experiencers, victims, however, whatever label you want to use, as well as specialists, defectors, insiders, and then even people such as trauma therapists with information can anonymously submit information, report information. And we're looking for persons of interest, locations of interest, or even just general reports. So what are they reporting as pertaining to this? We're really going into the world of MKUltra, the umbrella. We're talking about behavioral modification. We're talking about mind control. Okay. And yes, that's a large pill to swallow for some people, but don't let the semantics, don't get caught up on these semantics. Okay. Because when it comes to these black projects, when it comes to UAP, when it comes to the disclosure scene, people that are involved with very sensitive programs, have had certain conditioning applied to them, and this goes way back to the Manhattan Project. This goes way back to nuclear programs, and even far before. So anyways, again, organized safety is a platform to where people can anonymously submit information. And when you submit that information, you can opt in, obviously, for further questioning if you, would like to be able to, answer further questions to help us out and to help the whole situation out. We recommend using a completely anonymous email address, that meaning a new email address. And again, for due diligence, we recommend something like Proton Mail or something like this, so it can be end-to-end encrypted. But more importantly, what you can do is opt in for notification if your information is corroborated, meaning if you report a person of interest or a location of interest, or just general information, if it's corroborated by someone else, then that will be linked in our system. And then we have a liaison from organized safety contact you, say, hey, some other people have mentioned this person. Some other people have mentioned this program. Some other people have mentioned this location. And then what we can do is we can discuss and we can connect you. But aside from that, what that allows in the big picture to do is to build up information to pursue, whether it just be mapping out the network and understanding these crimes against humanity at large, or on a, more finer tune, whether that means pursuing, civil litigation or where you want to get preponderance of evidence, whether it be criminal investigation, a burden of proof, things like this. So, when people that don't know each other are naming the same things, that can really build up a case. And again, you can be completely anonymous, and the point here is to build up information, build up corroborating data, and build up a case before people decide to come forward and reveal themselves, because it can be a harrowing experience and it can be hard to pursue. So before you make that decision to say, hey, go public as a whistleblower, or go public by yourself making an accusation against someone, you can build up perhaps with other people and then come forward much more effectively, right? So again, organized safety is a platform where you can submit information anonymously. It is end-to-end encrypted, and it's just a revolutionary way to pursue justice and also help map out this network of, correlated crimes that work together that are associated with many of these subjects, getting into Epstein, getting into even issues like Diddy, got Nygaard. When you're really looking at these problems with the system of reporting for things like this, you can go to the Boy Scouts, which just had like one of the largest, lawsuits ever, where there was 80,000 victims. You get into the Catholic Church, Jehovah's Witnesses have had similar issues, Mormons. There's been a lot of reports that get swept under the rug. You got Nassar, with the Olympic gymnasts. You got Sandusky with the wrestlers, right?
Sure.
You just have so many people to where they've been reporting and they get swept under the rug. It gets covered up. But this way, it's for people to come together, build up information, build up cases, as safe as possible, and then to bring it forward as effectively as possible.
I love it. Like the concept to me is like the receipts. Like you're building a platform for people to come with receipts. When they finally do decide that they want to go public with whatever information they have, you've got like a database of receipts. Which is, utterly crucial. And I think, most people want to give humans the benefit of the doubt. And I don't. I've never been able to do that. And I think, with a lot of the topics that whistleblowers who have used organized safety, to try and come forward, I think, people just don't understand like the actual threat to their life and livelihood, that having this kind of information or being a part of something as sinister and then having the guts to like speak out against it. People have died for way less than exposing some kind of huge state secret. So I am interested now. I want to make sure we talk about this. How did you get into doing this? Now, I know this story is very complex. So please prune the tree as you wish, but kind of explain to folks what was your motivation for starting this, because I think it gives a super huge context.
Yeah, sure. So, my grandfather was an 891st Air Engineer. In World War II. He ended up getting pulled into the OSS, okay? Whenever the end of World War II came about, he went into, Hitler's bunker and, there's other aspects, but there was things he reviewed. And then here in the States, amidst Operation Paperclip, Project Paperclip, whatever, where the Nazi scientists were coming in, what was industrialized at that time was some of their research, some of the other research that was put all together, into behavioral modification, MKUltra. And that's, that's a very general term because it was an umbrella. Behavioral modification affecting how people behave, right? Affecting their behavior, affecting their mind, all this. That goes from a direct Manchurian candidate level of programming where people have essentially like a subconscious sleeper persona that can be activated with certain keywords, triggers, phrases, things like this, right? But also then you have your kind of more general, slightly more passive, but still, there's direct things that affect this, but then you have your just generalized behavior modification to the public, whether it be misinformation on the news, whether it be just certain information on the
or
news,
like national pride propaganda kind of stuff, like simple generic programming of behavior.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or even certain frequencies blanketed on the populace, whatever it is. So anyways, long story short was, I had been enrolled, unbeknownst to me, I had been enrolled in an MKUltra-like program from birth, okay? And part of that was horrible that was enabled. Some of it was directed. But when you get to the government end, they like to create a situation that happens by itself, right? And then pull from it so they don't have their hands directly dirty, right?
Yeah.
Long story short was, in my early 20s, I wanted nothing more than to, do bad things to bad people, right? Because I had been and, I had to get the bad guy, right? I ended up going into clandestine services. I had friends of the family, so on and so forth. Long story short was I found out that I had been groomed from birth in one of these programs, okay? And there had been a lot of bad things that happened, and the whole situation was beyond unethical. I found out that there was aspects of government, but, not just the U.S. responsible. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, what is the government other than people in certain positions, right? But there was globalist interest. There was all sorts of things.
Sure.
But it all converged on my situation. And, there was aspects of the clandestine services into human trafficking, into, drug and weapon trafficking, all sorts of things. So long story short was I found out that I had been in one of these programs since birth. I had been groomed. It was horribly unethical, to say the least. And then on top of that, anything that could be justified was kind of unjustifiable because the oversight, the people that were running these programs were horribly corrupt and were misusing assets for their own personal agenda, just for disgusting things. So anyways, when I went to whistleblow, I was almost killed. I ended up imprisoned. There was a clerical error amidst all this. Anyways, long story short was I, spent some time in prison. And when I got out and got my record fixed, I started this organized safety. Okay. And we can get into this if we want, but the work was inspired by and expounded upon the work of Valerie Wolf at the 1995 ACHRE, at the Presidential Hearing Committee. And what she did was just present corroborating information, blindly cooperating information, okay, from therapists, from their clients, and so on and so forth. So, what I decided to do was, hey, what's better way to address these sort of things that are kind of hard to prove and hard to put your finger on, other than collecting a body of information, of especially blindly corroborating information, that we can bring forth. And what a better way to do that than as safe as possible, where people can anonymously submit it, and then if we get a bunch of information that's the same, then people can decide to, come forward and, unanonymously, right, to name themselves, right?
Well,
so
and
essentially
have some leverage in their disclosure. Yeah,
exactly. So it would be worth taking that risk, right? Because there's always going to be risks no matter what. But so essentially, yes, just my personal experience, being subject to crimes myself, and also being involved with unethical, to say the least, euphemism, government programs. I decided to make organized safety, along with other people who have never been public. But again, it's just, a way where you can anonymously submit information. If that information is cooperated, then you can link up with other people behind the scenes and you just build up cases, whether it be civil, whether it be criminal, or whether you're just getting together and helping build the body of information. So networks can be taken down, networks similar to Epstein, networks similar to what Diddy had going on, because you better believe it's not just Diddy. There was a whole network of criminality, and, these spider webs are connected by threads all over. So yes, that's why I started, because of personal involvement with this thing. And I just tried to get in the most effective and as safe as possible, right?
Well, okay, so you bring up a couple good things. I want to make sure we touch on them. The first one I want to make sure I ask you is, when you finally understood that you had been a part of this, your brain had been shaped without your insight, your perspective. What was that like? What was it like coming to that realization and like analyzing your whole life up until that point and being like, oh, this is all just to serve an agenda?
Well, I mean, there was layers to it. I mean, quite frankly, it was absolutely devastating. I, as a grown man, I was very successful. I was doing very well for myself at this point. And, I believed I was, carrying out my own agenda, right? That I was making my own choices, and I was, affecting the change that I wanted to see. I was being the change that I wanted. And again, I had a lot of responsibilities. I had a lot of people under my charge, a lot of people that I was supporting financially and by other means. So when this all came to, it was absolutely devastating, because I had been fooled. I had been tricked. I had been doing things that I thought were for the greater good, but really, there had been people harmed that were for nothing more than a corrupt agenda that was not my own. It was absolutely devastating. It was horrible. It was a hard pill to swallow. On the other end, there was also a weight off my shoulders. There was a relief because there was so many things when I was really driven and tunnel visioned as a successful male that had been through it. A lot of times things would come up in my mind and shake it off. Let me just go. Use it as drive. Use it as fuel, right? But I never really explored those. So when finally this all came to, and I also experienced a series of flashbacks to where, flashback is in I relived it in real time, right? It made everything make sense because there was definitely some things that, there's some questions I had. There were some gaps in time. There was some memory loss that I didn't have, and and it filled in the blanks, and it did. It made everything make sense. So there was a mild bit of relief, and and a weight off my shoulders too. But I mean, mostly, honestly, it was horribly upsetting. It was devastating, and my life as I knew it, my understanding of the world as I knew it was over at that point.
Well, I'm interested too, like the more you've worked with people who have had similar or adjacent experiences, the more you've worked with helping people like live their truth and tell their stories in a positive and a way that can help them emerge from it. What do you think is like your biggest advantage in helping people like that come forward? Like I see that there's probably a lot of people who look to you and are like, I want to be like that at some point. After I get past this, I want to be like that. But like, what do you think you offer to people who are trying to come forward that lets them know it's going to be okay? Does any of that make sense? Like, what do you think your strategic advantage is to letting people know, like, this is a hard thing to do, but it is okay, and you will be better beyond it?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing that's exclusive to me when you're getting there. I mean, it's just a reassurance and support. I mean, as horrible as it is, you will get through it, and there is a other side to it. I mean, it's just all I can offer, like someone that's found out they've been involved with this, someone with information that's going through it and in the middle of it, all I can offer them is support and reassurance, that if it does feel horrible, if you're dealing with this roller coaster of emotions, like the roller coaster does eventually get through to the end.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you've had a emotional upheaval and it's just horrible and it just feels like your life is over and you don't see anything to look forward to, like right now you're feeling this at 100% and was buried, but eventually that 100% comes down, and you will be able to transition to a newer life. You'll be able to find things, you'll be able to find new outlets for what you had, to release some of these emotions. You'll be able to find new purpose, a new thing to do. This really all I can offer is just just experience and support. I mean, and that's nothing exclusive to me at all. Obviously I have my own advice for people, because there's definitely, before you go spilling it all publicly, right, you might want to, take some time for yourself and get some things in order, and make sure that you're being as safe as possible and tactical. But yeah, I mean, I don't have anything necessarily. There's no secret trick, right, to dealing with this. When you do, it's not an easy path. It's devastating. But no matter what, people that are going through this, they've already been through the worst. Typically, these people go through horrible experiences when they're young. So like, you've already came out the other side of the worst. Now it's just kind of,
this ain't that bad. Yeah.
Exactly. It's really, you might have to relive some of it and go through it, but now you get to take the adult wisdom and kind of finally process some of these old experiences, you can bring your adult wisdom to them and process them and then help move them from, the part of your brain where it, the trauma bypassed your hippocampus and wrote straight to your amygdala and your nervous system, right? And you can kind of process that into normal memory storage over time. So yeah, there's no magic secret or trick to it. It's hard work and just going through it. But yeah, what I can bring is support and experience, a little bit of wisdom and advice.
So you had mentioned that your family was like connected to military, and we were talking about this briefly before we started, but can you kind of explain the different level? Like there's the generic level of programming that an average citizen would get. That would be whatever you're seeing on the news, whatever you're reading in the newspaper, the general level of propaganda to get us to behave in a certain way and buy certain products. But then it gets like there's like levels of more sinister that it becomes, and it's not a coincidence that a lot of people whose families are at some point involved in these programs have to either go through some of that programming to make sure they don't spill any beans that they may know, but then also it kind of acts as like a recruitment to just kind of keep them in the system, or like generations of that family in the system. Can you kind of explain like the level or tiers of programming?
Yeah. I mean, you have your like general thing, like general society and stuff like that. Like, I mean, you're every day you're going to be bombarded with stuff, whether it be, advertisers for companies trying to sell you products, right? Like they're kind of like using NLP and certain tricks, sure, right? To kind of like bombard you through advertisements. But just like on the general level of government, like, you're going to be subject to propaganda. You're going to be subject to certain information that's meant to affect you in certain ways and stuff like this. But then, say you have people, say you have someone involved in a classified program, say they're, nuclear physicists, say whatever it is, say they're involved in this. Well, there is certain conditioning that's typically applied to them because, this stuff goes way back to, again, like the Manhattan Project, things like this, like, people talk, okay, and information leaks, okay, and, they don't want to just leave that up to human behavior, human chance. So there's certain mental conditioning that's applied for basically silence and compliance, right? To reduce that risk, okay? And there can be different techniques. Just like, if someone shuts their hand in a car door, you might be careful when you go to the car because you remember, I got to be careful.
Had that bad experience.
Yeah, there can be certain conditioning that's like kind of expounds on that effect, right? That like if someone's like thinking about talking about something that's sensitive, they remember, there's penalties for this, not just physical pain, but other things, right? So like that can come into play. Then you have the aspect too to where, depending on what level of projects that people are involved with and the sensitivity, their family also can be enrolled in things. And you see a lot of people that are like in military intelligence families or a certain level up, generals, whatever, like, you have, like the DODEA, the, Department of Defense Education Act, right? You have like your own set of schools and stuff that they might be routed to, or programs and this and that. Whatever it is, there can be, again, certain levels of behavior modification. There's a scale to where it's like, okay, let's make sure we mold these people into what we need. But then there can be certain, depending on the aptitude, depending on this and depending on that, there's certain traits. A large one is dissociation, which is hereditary, but people can be selected for certain programs and think, hey, they might be good for this, they might be good for that. Whether we want them to go into media, whether we want them to go into espionage, whether we want them to go into politics, and maybe their people are in politics, maybe their people, there's a lot of generational trades and stuff like that, because again, this, some of these aptitudes are passed down generationally, and certain, aspects are hereditary. But what can happen is, aside from the behavioral modification, there's also enhanced development. So there's just a scale of these programs, and it goes from, reinforcement and conditioning for silence and compliance, to full on trauma based mind control programming, to where people essentially develop split personalities that can be activated, and this can be like a sleeper spy persona, or it can be, people with a kind of a subconscious persona, that kind of control certain aspects, such as if they're a newscaster, right? If they're a news anchor. Things like this. I mean, there's just a complete scale. But I would say at the far end of the scale, would be, full blown Manchurian candidate level split personality can be activated programming. And then, on the lesser end of the scale, would just be more passive conditioning that reinforces silence and compliance, to where they know that they need to obey orders, and that they know that they need to be quiet about government state secrets, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I just, it's so wild to me now, especially in 2025, where there's so many examples of like loosely connected networks of people that rely on these methods to get people, and successfully get people to remain silent. We'd mentioned Epstein. There's the whole Savile thing in the UK. There's the Den Network, which was the Bryan Singer thing in Hollywood, P. Diddy. Like, there's so many different aspects of this at play. I don't understand why more people don't accept that it's a real thing. And moreover, to your point, with relation specifically to the government was looking into this for a long time, debatably never stopped. They got really good at it, and they use it. But it's just really that simple. I don't, that there's to me, it's difficult to understand why more people don't accept that is something that is at play in modern society. And again, we were talking about In-Q-Tel, and I just did an episode with a fellow podcaster from The Swerve, and we went into the history of In-Q-Tel, even the existence of the internet. Majority of the tools that we use on the internet, they were all developed for intelligence purposes, and the unified goal between all the people that were trying to advance those technologies was behavior modification and predictive analytics. And we're there. Like, those things propel our society, including targeted ads, which were, again, CIA grade surveillance technology that was developed and deployed to us, but sold to us as this thing that'll help us get these cute little products we want. So I'm interested, like, in your perspective, like, as somebody who has been front row to some of this, what do you think is the hardest thing for people to understand? Even when you give them all the historical context, what do you think makes it so hard for people to accept that this kind of shit is going on?
So, I mean, and I really don't prefer, cliche terms, but I mean, we're just dealing with cognitive dissonance. I mean, what's the hardest? Here's the deal is, you don't want to accept this. Why? Because if you say, okay, I'm looking at all this in front of me, and yes, I understand, okay, some of our, largest social media personalities, some of our largest news anchors, newscasters, some of the people that are feeding us information, they are completely controlled. And they wouldn't even have to have a split personality per se, or right, anything like that. That's more a method just to control them, right? Because a lot of this, again, is from the top down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
just the rules, whether they're unspoken or direct. Like, people know, like, hey, if you do this, your YouTube's going to get deleted. If you play by these rules, then it won't. Hey, if you do this, you can, play the game. If you don't do that, then you're going to get stuck on the bench, or you might even get kicked out of the field, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, again, like, these methods, it's a top-down approach. The lesser methods get applied to the populace in general, but the most direct methods get applied to the people that govern the most, that have the most influence, stuff like this. So the most direct stuff gets applied to the people that then can passively, affect the others, right? That's just kind of the way it goes, and is the smart use of resources.
The hierarchy,
but it's hard to accept for people because if you say, okay, this is happening, one, you understand it's just a horrible situation that you're dealing with. A lot of people are worried about the day to day. They don't have time to deal with this. And guess what? It's depressing. It's unfortunate. And when you accept this as a reality, you're just accepting a very unfortunate, uncomfortable situation, especially say, it's going to be like this for everybody, but especially like a type A personality male that wants to do what they want to do and wants to have a level of control. You realize, hey, I have less control than I thought. There's this. I don't feel like I can do something directly about it. Like I can't put my hands around this, and fix it immediately. It's a tough pill to swallow. So, I mean, there's a level of cognitive dissonance. And again, I hate cliche terms, but that's what it is because, you're just up against a mountain and it is so sinister. It's so evil. And it's just hard to accept that people are doing this to each other and how prevalent it is. So it's just one of those things that's just unfortunate to deal with. Because really, forget the historical data and applying common sense to it. If you start looking in the right places, which really, again, trauma therapists, dissociative trauma therapists, there's tons of podcasts and stuff that have hundreds and hundreds of survivors. And even some of these whistleblowers are talking about aspects of it, but the information is out there. The cooperation is out there. If anybody really looks and tries to look into this, you can definitely get the information you need to know that, hey, this is real, this is taking place, and this is ongoing. This is operational and ongoing. There are programs in place, and this is how the world is ran. It's verifiable, okay? Yeah, there might not be an exact document signed by the president to say, yes, this is happening, deal with it, but it's a very, verifiable, it's a very, obvious situation. Just, if you look at this realistically and actually go into it. But yeah, what's stopping people from it? It's just cognitive dissonance. It's such a horrible situation. You don't want to accept it. And it's just, it's just horrible. That's all it is. It's simple. Honestly, simple. I hate it. You get down to this. It's simple. It's common sense. And it's just the way it is. It's just kind of unchecked and got so completely far out of control. Because that's how it goes. And when it really gets into this, it's who would want to be involved with this? Either people wanting to take advantage of it or people that have been through it. Because if you're in the middle of it and you're just trying to live your life, you don't want to involve yourself with horrible stuff. You don't want to hear about crimes against children. You don't want to hear about brainwashing. You don't want to hear about this. So over time, that effect has kind of kept on building up to where only the people that are willing to do this for their own corrupt purposes have really got involved in these certain areas, right? And it's just been a skewed situation. It's like that in many fields, because even if you go into human trafficking stuff, right, to where people that are supposed to be fighting human trafficking, well, guess what? The layman doesn't want to deal with that. It's horrible. They want to hear that someone's dealing with it. But a lot of people, unfortunately, there's a lot of corruption in that field, even the counter human trafficking, because guess what? Yeah. It's a perfect place for people that perpetrate that sort of thing to get into. And over time, the people that really want to affect the legislation, that want to affect the situation, that want to have access and control and power, they put themselves there, where the other people are like, oh my God, I wouldn't want to deal with that. You go home and think about that, and it's horrible, right? So you have very few not very few, there is lots of good people in it too, don't get me wrong, but it's just a skewed situation to where, the layman, the people that don't have a direct brush with it, they don't want to deal with it. Okay. Yeah. So again, it's out of sight, out of mind. You just, as long as someone's telling you something pretty that you can want to put your trust and faith in, you'll just let it go. So yeah, it's just, it's cognitive dissonance and just, not wanting to deal with it and, having your hands full already. That's, it's just really, that's all it is.
On that note, I want to again commend you and commend Emma Catherine for the Imagination Podcast. Shout out to the work that both of you are doing in that respect. You're talking about subjects that you sum it up perfectly. It's people don't want to have the bubble burst. Everyone likes to walk around in this bubble like nothing bad is ever going to happen to me or anybody I know. And whenever they come into contact with the reality of the world, it's so disruptive to them that they will choose to ignore it, plain and simple. And I think there's so many examples through history, and especially recent history, as we were just talking about, Epstein, Franklin Bank scandal, the Dutroux affair. This is not like a new thing. These are old. There's a million examples of them. And this is stuff that I think that most people are just so naive to assume that our intelligence wouldn't abduct children and use them as a ploy to create blackmail. The history will show that we will do that. We have no problem doing that, especially if it means compromising people to behave in a certain way. And we learned it from the mafia. The mafia was doing it to politicians for the same reason. This is a tried and true tactic. It's been used for forever. And even when we have modern iterations like Epstein or Diddy or the list of a million other scenarios that are occurring right now with corrupt judges or cops or whatever, all throughout the country involved in these things, I don't know. That's why, to me, this stuff needs to be analyzed. It needs to be talked about. If more people know about these things and know what to look out for, maybe we'll be able to spot some of it and hopefully stop it. But at a bare minimum, be able to spot it and kind of, sniff it out and uncover where the tentacles lead. So I want to kind of shift gears a bit, but kind of staying on topic. There's been a lot of stuff recently in the UAP scene, right? And for the longest time, I was trying to understand how the MKUltra portion fit in there, because I knew it fit in there, and your context here kind of gives that a lot of light. If you could kind of just briefly explain the conundrum that we're facing now with the people that are coming forward. I've had Eric on this show. I love Eric Hecker from Antarctica. He is a whistleblower. He has faced a ton of reprisal just from talking about his experiences, and he's still really brave enough to get it out there. He was telling me about this thing that he experienced after the fact, coming back from Antarctica. Or I guess maybe he realized it when he was there, but he realized that Raytheon was doing psychological experimentation on them. Like, they would change the price of stuff in the general store, or they would restrict access to this recreation, or just to see like what would happen. And there was even a book in the library that kind of outlined the fact that, yes, these people were out there working for Raytheon, managing the station, but while they were there, Raytheon was capitalizing on running experiment. And it probably wasn't Raytheon. It was Raytheon on behalf of CIA, FBI, and whatever other, whatever org. That's what these military contractors do. They get hired by these agencies to do weird just like this. So I'm kind of interested in, could you kind of explain, with at least the past 5 years of people coming forward, where the overlap with MKUltra and either them enacting programming that they were programmed to do, or advancing the agenda of programming to influence people or scare people or silence people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is a lot, right? So there's different directions I can go in, but I guess a little bit of the base thing is like, first, people need to realize when you're going into this whole UFO, UAP, NHI, alien disclosure element, okay? You have to think to yourself, hey, is there advanced technology out there? Is it being covered up? Is there black projects? Of course there's black projects, right? And, take that, now think, okay, so how do we keep this secret for so long? Okay. Yes, it's classified, this and that, but like, you have to understand that, like, just taking on the history that we know, that there are these, advanced behavioral modification mechanisms, that there was just unlimited funding, poured into them. And it's not just that this happened in one area. Like, this was across like some of our foremost institutions, and people at the top of their field, consummate professionals. Okay. So when you accept that, you have to say, okay, so what was the purpose for this? Well, the purpose for this was, operational utilization. Yeah, what, you think they did this for nothing? They did this to apply where it was necessary. And you get into these aspects of these programs, and yes, that's it. And like you said, it can be Raytheon, and sure, maybe, a 3-letter agency, some of the Alphabet boys are using that as a proxy. But really, like, it's a group of people within all these. Because again, just like, you have the CIA, you have Raytheon, you have whoever it is. It's just people, and whether it's a company or whether it's a governmental agency, whether it's a non-governmental agency, NGO, whether it's a governmental agency, whatever it is, it's just people. And whether you're, obeying the laws and you're a politician, whatever, it's people playing by a set of rules, right? I mean, that's it. That's it. So, you have a group of people. And there tend to be they tend to be in like other societies and things like that actually unite their true loyalty and have people working together. But, they'll have people that are in Raytheon. They'll have people in the CIA. They'll have people in legislative, executive, and judicial. That way that they unite the powers that were meant to be separated, but they're united within their own group, and then they can really have their way, right? So, like, I mean, again, all this is just people. So you have corrupt people. It's not the whole agency at large.
The system,
it's not this.
It's the people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Even if there is a higher concentration in certain areas, right? Well, of course, because that's the areas where they have access to the control, to the power. But I mean, here's what it is when you get people in certain areas, and especially when you're getting this UAP stuff, you're getting these black projects. These people go through this standard, okay? It's not just, it's literally like, there's things, when you get to this, like, say, if you're going to be working in a certain facility, okay, that has top secret stuff, above top secret stuff, whatever you want to call it. Especially if you get into, like, say, you want to get with some of these advanced materials, if you want to get to some of this just, top of the top stuff, literally, these people have to be put through this programming standard. It is mandatory. And you say, oh, how could it be everybody? How could it be everybody? Well, think about how many people there are in the world, okay? It's not everybody. It's a select group of people. And these people were first conditioned, they were first selected, and then they went through this, psychological conditioning. And if it wasn't successful, well, then they didn't go into that field. You're looking at the finished product. You're looking at after the fact, okay? So, like, relatively looking at the world's population, and then, these people that we have our eyes on that are involved with this, it's actually a relatively small percentage of people. Okay. So, like, yeah, it's like, oh my God.
Small,
yeah. How could it be everybody? How could it be everybody? It's just the people you're being shown. So it seems like everybody in your current world right there, but that's because they went through the process to get there. So, like, just like you look at actors, you look at politicians. Oh, how could it be everybody? How could it be everybody? It's not everybody. They had they went from everybody and then dwindled it down to the small percentage that were able to go through this. And that's who it is. So, like, it seems like so, like, impossible, and like, how could they just get everybody? It's like, they went through the pipeline, and there's like a whole process beforehand, and this is dwindled down to a super small percent in the big picture. But again, when it's in front of you, it seems like everybody, so it seems like so improbable and so unlikely, but it's just not. It's just like, hey, these people, they went through a certain vetting process. They went through certain, they went through the pipeline to get to that job. Well, there was other aspects along the way, So, I mean, so here's the thing. It is what it is. And, I mean, I guess your question was like, so, talking about how these people, how it relates to these people. I mean, it's just, I know Eric has talked about some of this. He didn't just talk about the psychological stuff there, like when he was there. He talked about being involved with some stuff as a child too. I know he's talked about
in
that.
Long Island. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been other people that have talked about a little bit. But I can assure you that 100% of these people that were operational personnel involved with these programs went through this conditioning. The scary part is the people that aren't aware that they went through the conditioning, because that means they're still fully under control. But there is also people that realize they went through conditioning that are still under an element of control. Unfortunately, it's, you can dwindle a lot of this down to post-hypnotic suggestions, okay? If it's still in that part of the brain and in the subconscious and they don't remember it taking place, it has hold and has its power, okay? It's hard to fight this. So people, can, think they're speaking out. You have some of these whistleblowers that might believe they're wholeheartedly whistleblowing and, going for the truth, but really, they're spokespersons and they're, telling what they're supposed to tell. Because here's the deal is, this whole thing that's coming forward with, and I'm going off a little bit here, but this whole thing that's coming forward, they talk about orbs, they talk about craft. At best, they talk about questionable oversight. And yes, a little bit happened to them where they wanted to speak out, but okay, questionable oversight, one, for classified programs and all this, we're not going to have all the details. What do you know about the foremost raids that our, tier 1 military forces went on? What do you know about all these, top, state of the art, technology that we're using in classified situations? What do you know about these operations? You don't. And
we shouldn't.
And you shouldn't. Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I'm not even arguing that you should. That's the point. So you can expect not to know it. Okay. So it's just, the thing is though, is that when you're talking about the oversight, that's not grounds for immediate action. We hear about these whistleblowers. What are these whistleblowers actually whistleblowing on? That there's craft out there. They want the government to tell them that there's aliens. What do you do? You're asking the government for stuff. You're NDA compliant. You're DOPSR compliant, you're, DOPSR equivalent, because there's a few different things to basically say, you can say depending on what field you're in, Title 10, Title 50, and other aspects. But what are these people actually whistleblowing it on, What really but the powers that be don't want you to know is that they're brainwashing operational personnel starting as children, okay? And, even if that was justified for national security means for the most sensitive programs, the fact is that intertwined with this is corruption to where it's not for national security. It's not for, for example, here in America, it's not for the benefit of the state, right? It's not for, fighting other nations or maintaining strategic advantage. There is actually globalist groups and non-globalist groups, but especially globalist groups that are corrupt, and they are, doing what they want, and they're carrying out their own agenda, and they're corrupt, and they want to get, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And they want to get what they can get. So even if anything was justified under national security, it's not applicable. Okay, because these people are misusing assets, they're misusing the process from A to Z, and horrible, corrupt things are happening. So, again, a lot of these people that are whistleblowing, aren't actually really, they've butchered the term whistleblowing. What is whistleblowing? If you're talking about looking at orbs and craft and you just want the public to know the truth and certain things to be declassified, you're just talking about stuff, and that's an opinion. If there's specific crimes that need to be addressed, hey, that's a thing, okay? So, that's what it is. And, I personally know from firsthand experience and personal interactions with a lot of these people, that, several, now I'm saying I'm under the belief that every single one of these people have been under some form of this conditioning. But sure. I do have 100% knowledge from firsthand experience with several of them, knowing that they did. But then they get lost and they hear something. They get told a little lie, and even they have cognitive dissonance. They say, okay, well, we're going to fix this behind the scenes. Okay, so we're going to talk about this. Okay, oh, they're letting me do this, and they're going to work disclosure through me, and, we're going to summon some stuff through psionics, and then, bring some data forth. What does that even do? What does that do? They're literally brainwashing children through torturous methods, okay? And, it's just absolutely disgusting. This is all planned, okay? That's what people need to understand. This whole disclosure element, this is all planned because the powers that be, they don't want to just keep all this technology that they've spent decades and unlimited resources for research and development. They don't want to keep that hidden forever. One, interconnectivity for people is becoming more and more, and it's easier for someone to get a snap on their cell phone or, for just word of mouth to get out, even though they've kept this pretty locked down. But the people that created this stuff, they want to be able to use it. The billionaires and then the cutting edge, military intelligence, stuff like this, they want to use their fancy flying toys, okay? They want different things to happen. So, what do they want? They want limited rollout. They want controlled disclosure. And we're headed towards that. We are headed towards, that with everything, there's always a little tinge of national security and unknown risks at play, right? Okay. So what they want is to roll out this fancy new technology, but also still have those threats that they're up against. So they want the technology to roll out to where they get to use it. What is the common benefit for the average person? Nothing. Some people are going to feel justified and they're going to say, oh, I had this experience and now they're admitting this is real, so I don't feel so alone. And they're using that, they're weaponizing that against people. Okay, because some people just want to feel, justified. People want support for seeing an orb, seeing this, seeing that. They want it explained, and they want, who they see as authority to acknowledge it. And then for their peers to not make fun of them so they're not an outcast. Like that's really like what they're using and what this is all about. But in reality, like we have a lot deeper problems that we need to go in. And here's something else people need to know. Okay. There's ICD-10 codes. That's medical insurance codes. Okay. And medical insurance codes are essentially like if you go in and have to be treated for an ailment and then it's coded to your insurance company or whatever it is in the system, it's coded under ICD-10. That's the different type of coding, of medical coding. So there's someone called Christopher Kit Green is what he's known as. And, he apprenticed under, Andrea Puharich and other mind control doctors that were, associated with, MKUltra and other things and, worked on synthetic telepathy and things like this. But this person, Christopher Kit Green, he also worked with Gary Nolan. He was the guy that everybody that had a UAP experience that was like in the field or like had damage from like advanced propulsion or something like that, or like some of these craft, they all sent them to Christopher Kit Green. Okay. Yeah. So he had a study at Skinwalker Ranch. And I know I'm going way off here, but this is highly relevant.
Please. Yeah, please.
So he had a study at Skinwalker Ranch. It's called the Interference syndrome study at Skinwalker Ranch. Interference syndrome is interchangeable with Havana syndrome and anomalous health incidents. It's biological tissue damage and other ailments that are associated with either phenomena or advanced propulsion, things like this. It goes hand in hand with frequency, with radiation. Frequency goes into the radiation. Radiation, people get hurt, okay? It causes tissue damage. It causes brain damage, so on and so forth. So these codes were established at Skinwalker Ranch. Why is that important? Because Skinwalker Ranch, to the layman, that's like unknown NHI territory to where mystical phenomena is taking place. And there may be some. But matter-of-factly, besides that, is that it's an exotic weapons testing ground. 100%. And there's even been things brought forth to where like someone's brain scans was linked up with exotic weapons testing. And, it was like Chris Martell, I think was one of the hands there or whatever. Long story short, they have, made these ICD-10 codes, at a location under the pretense of some of this being caused by anomalous phenomena, unknown, right? To where we can't like pin it on somebody. So they've established that. Because that needed to be in place so when they do roll out all these advanced craft, these other methods of, frequencies blanketing the populace for surveillance, for micro manipulation of frequencies that affect our brains and behavior. So they can roll this out because there is adverse health effects, there is biological tissue damage and other things, and they want to be able to treat that, but they don't want culpability. They don't want to be held responsible, right? So like, again, this is all the play. They want to be rolling this out. Notice another aspect of this disclosure is that, there's constant threat from NHI. You got Elizondo. And we're not getting into like who's what and, how credible or not they are. But the point is that their story and what the public is hearing. Elizondo saying, oh, yes, we have unknown threats. There's capabilities. They're not our own. And are they a threat? Yes, because they exist and there's unknowns. Okay. You have other people, even, for example, Stephen Greer, who claims, hey, there might be a false flag alien incident. Right. And he warns about that. But he feeds into the false flag alien incident because guess what he also says? He says, hey, our sources are saying that they are shooting down alien craft. They're summoning them with psionics and they're shooting them down. And our sources say that the NHI is getting sick of it. and they've had about enough. So even though he warns about false flags, at the same time, in the opposite breath, he is saying that, hey, they're shooting them down, they're sick of it. So it's
We're
still
pissing
like
them off.
We're
going to start a war.
Exactly. So it creates a threat. So people may be familiar with Operation Northwoods, which was a declassified operation that JFK put a stop to. And it essentially was going to be a false flag that was blamed on Cuba to justify military intervention, right? Okay.
Including flying planes into buildings and
yes, exactly, right? So say Operation Northwoods was the thing. There's many other things that are questionable since then that you look like, okay, that likely is related. But the thing is about if you have a false flag that involves phenomena or NHI and phenomena, they're not Cuba. They can't stand up and say, hey, actually, this wasn't us and this is a lie. Don't believe it. So basically, if there's damage to people, and already we've been pumping all this, hey, NHI are real. People are looking at orbs. People are looking at craft. They say this couldn't possibly be ours. And like the breadth and the consensus of what's being told to the populace is that, there is phenomena, there is NHI out there. Again, this is the passive conditioning. Predictive programming, maybe. This is the passive conditioning that everybody's undergoing because this is what they believe. All they believe is what they know. How could they know anything else, right? So they've been conditioned to expect that. So then, say a lot of people die or there's damage done, right? And it can't be pinned on people, and they say it's NHI, they say it's anomalous phenomena, or they say it's NHI craft, whatever it is. Well, then that can provide the justification again. And they say, hey, we got to roll out this. We've, made some breakthroughs. We're going to roll out this. We need also surveillance to test people. We need to roll out these craft, whatever it is. Again, it's all lined up. It is absolutely lined up to roll out some of this advanced tech that we've been going through research and development and we've perfected and now is, operational, to roll this out again for the powers that be to use. The people don't get it. The people that we can hope at best for an energy source, okay? And then we don't have to pay our electricity bill. But what is that doing? Because you better believe that although, maybe you're dropping your electricity bill, guess what? The price of groceries have went up enough to where it doesn't even matter. It's back. It's back to normal. It's literally, there is nothing actually to gain. The only thing to gain is a little bit of people will be like, okay, now maybe I won't be made fun of because I say I had this experience, right? I mean, that's literally it. So, they've just created an environment where people are desperate for knowledge or desperate for validation or desperate for truth, and they want it from what they see as authority. And they don't want to be outcast, and just so alone, from their peers and stuff like this. So that's what it is. And, all these people that are coming forward and all the headliners especially, they have especially been through this because it's a top-down approach. Many of these people have been programmed at the Manchurian candidate level, okay? And, and again, like I said, I have firsthand experience talking with several of the current headliners, okay? We're talking about people at Skywatcher. We're talking about, people headliners, okay? I don't know how specific we want to get here, but I can back some of this up.
Current big names in the space,
the current big names in the space, and they've even tried to manipulate others that are talking about MKUltra and stuff in very deceitful ways. But guess what? If they weren't trying to be deceitful and all this, they would be talking about it publicly, not privately through the back channels trying to control it. So it's just a whole mess. But anyways, the stage has been set by the powers that be to roll out some of this technology for their own use, and then to roll it out under the pretenses of national security and danger, and also to have an uptick in, control and powers, in surveillance grids, in all this. And what's happening is the headliners that are involved with this are all under control and are spreading a message that only supports things that are really ultimately working against the best interests of humanity. The only good thing whatsoever, again, would be that some people are validated and feel less ostracized from community. But, you can't even be looking at the true story to come out from the powers that be, because the true story is that the mass majority of phenomena and experiences that people have had are synthesized and created from humans. That's what it is. There's large amounts of testing that go back that give people mystical experience, that give people phenomena, that, synthesized phenomena and experiences that relate directly to behavioral modification in that realm of things. So I went on a bit here, but that's what it is. And
continue. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that the journalists and the headliners haven't talked about the ICD-10 codes that were made by Christopher Kit Green? Are you kidding me? Where's the real reporting? That is major. That is so applicable that they've already done that. That's like setting the stage. The fact that, like, if anybody looks into this honestly, and I want you to know too, like, these journalists, do you know how many, and like one, me personally in my group have sent tons of people to talk to them. I've talked to them at length and actually linked some redacted, but conversations with some of these top journalists, that show, and like, for example, we have some of these top journalists that are calling for gate subjects, right? To say, hey, if you think you went under some psionic testing, I want you to hear your story and all this. These people know. They know 100% fact that these people went through MKUltra derived programming, okay? But there's also dangers to it because, again, if you get to unauthorized disclosures, there can be post-hypnotic suggestions for people literally to harm themselves. Also, for things to happen where people get their disclosure confused and appear crazy and things like this. So these journalists know about this, but they're complicit in the silence, in the cover-up of it, because they know if they're not, they know if they around, that's going to be it. Whatever, something bad might happen to them, or they just won't have their spot. So right. It's just disgusting because, the top players and the headliners mostly know about this behavioral modification. And that's the most important aspect, because here's the thing is, if the phenomena is getting faked, and if where people are being controlled, how could you possibly get to the truth without factoring that in and at least addressing it? If you don't address it and have that conversation at length, how could you ever get to what's real? You have got to go through that. Otherwise, you're constantly having muddy waters. You're constantly having blurry lines. You're constantly having a fuzzy situation. So the thing is that, like, these aren't serious people. They're not honest people. These are not people that are serving the best interests of humanity. It is a load of a lot of these people are responsible for, working against the best interests of humanity. Because here it is that behavioral modification, MKUltra research derived programs that are operational or ongoing are paramount. They are the underlying mechanism, that drives a lot of this just deeply on every level. And again, it's known. So, we just need to demand this at-length conversation. And yeah, I went off on a tangent, but that's what it is, because the fact that people are hearing this, and I'm sure people have heard aspects of this, but you're hearing this from me and not the, like, first and foremost journalists covering this and other people, like, lets you know something. And I've even shown too, like, publicly, to where, like, I'm talking to the staffers at SSCI, staffers of the Armed Forces Committee, things like this. I'm only going to leak so much information because I don't want to put certain people out there, but these people know. They know what's going on with this, and they're not willing to tell the public. They're complicit in the cover-up. It's disgusting. If they know and they're afraid of the consequences, then they should recuse themselves, because otherwise they are de facto gatekeeper. They're de facto limited hangout operation, and they are contributing to what the culprits want. And these people need to recuse themselves, because it's absolutely disgusting and it is unacceptable. Because again, people get hurt in these things, and again, when you have whistleblowers that are NDA compliant, when you have them DOPSR compliant, when these whistleblowers come on and they mention little peaks like, oh, I hate to think, but I believe I may have been part of MKUltra experimentation or something like that. Like, you see how terrified they are to talk about this, and they're still in the middle of it, and they're like putting their trust in the back channels to do something. We've been going through this. Me and my people have been going through this for over a decade. They're not rolling out the truth, okay? That's not part of the plan for the official channels. I hate to say this. The only chance we have is to be the change we need to see for ourselves. No one is going to work for humanity. No one is going to work for the people but the people. We need to do it ourselves, and we need to demand it. We don't need to put all our faith in a whistleblower. Don't need to put all our faith in a bureaucrat. We don't need to put all our faith in a bill like whistleblower protection or the UAP disclosure or anything like that. We need to set standards, and we need to demand people adhere to those standards and meet them. Otherwise, we need to move on to the next person. We need to watch where we pay attention. We need to watch where we spend our time. And we need to be smart about where we focus our energy, because, we are ultimately allowing some of this to happen, and we are feeding into that. Don't let them spoon feed you Okay. Order from off of the menu. Don't even order from on the menu, right? Don't play their game. Do your own thing. Flip the tables. Like, it's just, I'm over it. It's disgusting what's going on with the people. It is just absolutely disgusting, what's being perpetrated at large. Just stand up, demand these conversations at length. Again, the journalists know. Tons of the headliners know. And some of them even want to talk about it, but they're scared and they know that they won't get that airtime if they do go in depth about it. So yeah, that it needs to be addressed. All right. Ran over.
No, dude, this was great. I feel there's so much of what you're saying that I have been trying to articulate much poorer than you just did for the past 2 years. And it's like, it serves the agenda of both the government and private industry if the problem is aliens, because you can't sue aliens. You can sue Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin or the United States government for doing illegal shit. Like all that stuff I did with Eric. And yes, his story is rather interesting. Another great example of, as he got out of the weirdest situation in Antarctica, he starts looking back at his life and realizing, damn, a lot of my life was kind of stacking up to me being in this weird position. And not for nothing, even as a plumber, Eric had to go through literal psychological evaluations, which is bordering dangerously close to what could be MKUltra stuff. And he was the plumber. Like, he was a service industry person there, and he still had to go through some level of that. So the people that are actually doing legit scientific it's just a way for the government to hedge their bets on secrecy. What better way to know they're going to be secret, they're going to keep their mouth shut, than if we bury this in some recess of their mind that they can't freely access themselves. But it all boils back to, they don't want to talk about the real situation. It serves the purpose of being aliens, because if it's just humans developing this technology, then the humans are responsible for the chemical and industrial waste. Then humans are responsible for cancer clusters in and around the places that we're working on these technologies. The humans are responsible for the infrastructure that they created to blackmail people to keep this secret. So this to me is the crux of it. It's why we're not getting truth. It's why we're getting because if you just do a little bit of digging in and around this, you quickly open up a more horrifyingly real scenario of what is going on than aliens, than Pleiadians or Greys. It's way more horrifying because it's humans doing it, because we're the real monsters. So I loved that tirade. And again, like your story and perspective ties a lot of the context around this that I think most people are just bedazzled by the newest person coming out into the space. They're just like, oh my gosh, his story is crazy. Oh my gosh, look at who's putting this guy up on he must be real serious and legit. But no one's really applying the critical back into that. Like, what if they're lying? What if they're a government agent that's lying to me? Here's another thing that bothers me. In today's world, when I first started getting into these topics, it was a universally accepted policy. If you were entertaining these ideas, we can't trust what the official channels say. You just can't trust them because they have a vested interest. But now, people will come forward in the same way that you're talking about. They're under an NDA. They went through some kind of approval board to say what they can and can't speak about. And we're just going to trust what they say without critically questioning it or saying, what if they're lying? What the is wrong with us? So yeah, this may be kind of tangential. And again, without like putting too many people on blast, are you familiar with that thing that came out? Eric was one of the people that posted it, but it was an exchange between a big person in the UFO disclosure space and a person who was on like the Senate Intelligence Committee. Did you see that, Estrid?
Yeah, 100%. And if I may real quick, just touch on this. So
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So, like you're saying too, okay, at the same time of you have people like, okay, people want to listen to the new whistleblowers that come out. It's a whole thing. And then you have unlimited gossip on that end. But then you have, the people that are questioning them and stuff like that, you have a lot of negative questioning that's like very bad. So again, that's also used just to split. You have parties that are for disclosure or against disclosure. So if you question anything, you're against disclosure, but if you're for disclosure, but you have to like blindly believe, and again, it's not taking the right parts into account. It's not, what's the commonality here? And again, where are we going? Even if what you're interested in is aliens, is NHI, all that, how can you expect to get to the truth for the people that are lying at the base level? You can never get to the truth unless if you go through, the blurry mixture. And this is something just to touch back on if we want, but again, a lot of these people that have experiences throughout childhood, that can be synthesized in hypnosis. There's a scale called Harry Aaron's scale, okay? And that goes to 6 levels. Level 5 and 6 are positive and negative hallucinations. Positive meaning you can see something that's not there. Negative meaning that someone could hold a cup and then you could make their hand disappear and the cup would look like it's floating. So a lot of people are actually programmed to see aliens when they didn't see aliens, so on and so forth. So it's like a whole thing. It's absolutely disgusting. Anyways, and there's a lot to go from there. I have firsthand experience with this. You would never believe, if you see something, then you finally go through the flashback and see what it really is. You have to go through some of this to understand the depth of it. And people can look up just stage hypnosis that take advantage of negative and positive hallucinations. If stage hypnosis can do it, then you better believe that the government can. And again,
much more refined and complex.
Yeah,
for sure.
I recently posted to where Rand Corporation, Rand, they had a whole hypnosis thing from back in the 40s to where they were talking about putting people under hypnosis, specifically at doctors' visits. So doctors, white coats, psyche valves, things like this. So
before I got into most of this, I went down the hypnosis rabbit hole, and that's what made me accept that not only is MKUltra real, it's way worse than we thought, because there was a period of time in the 50s when organizations like Rand were trying to push hypnosis as a legitimate medical practice for people who are allergic to anesthesia. We'll just put you under hypnosis. In fact, a bunch of the books that I have on hypnosis are written by medical doctors who are
clinical hypnosis.
I've used this with very high success in a number of different scenarios. Doctors, dentists, all people who would normally have to maybe put someone under or apply some kind of pain numbing medication. But to your point, that tracks 100%.
100%, yeah. And there's a paper trail for it too, even. But anyways, getting to the conversation that leaked tonight, if you don't want to use names, yes, I am familiar with who was the advisor or staffer to the SSCI. There's also, worked at an aerospace company. Yes, and I have first-hand experience talking to that person directly myself, just so you know. And then also to the other prominent whistleblower who was in that conversation as a pseudonym, which I also have first-hand experience with their messaging, including trying to control some of this MKUltra podcasters behind the scenes. But yeah, so continue. Eric Hector had reposted this conversation between a SSCI advisor staffer and then a prominent whistleblower. Yeah.
Well, there are 3 points, and I want to present them, and maybe we can kind of unpack them a little bit. There were 3 points in that I found to be strange. First is there's almost, at the beginning of the conversation, there's almost an immediate recognition of the fact that they both want a solution for disclosure that works for the people who are trying to come forward and the government and industry. There is no scenario where the government goes after industry and outs industry. That's not happening. Okay. It's way too entrenched. And even looking in these, private communications, it is clear we want an exit strategy that reduces culpability on behalf of the government and industry, but also appeases the people who want to hear about some crazy technology that we've developed. That's one weird point. Mm-hmm. The second weird point is he talks, this figure talks about how they are part of the good faction. There's like a good and bad faction, and they're part of the good faction. Mm-hmm. And the context of that is just like, how do I know? Now, knowing who that person is and other scenarios that they're connected to, that's not the first time they've said that. In fact, it's the second known time publicly that that's been talked about. And in both times, it was a slightly different story. It was, hey, we've been working with these people. I've just now come to the conclusion that what they're doing is wrong, and I'm trying to come forward. But we want a path out that protects us as whistleblowers, right? But to your point, and I'm 100% in agreement with this, in the same way that Eric kind of puts it all on the line, whistleblowers put it all on the line. What if somebody's really trying to whistleblow, they say the thing so it can be known that there's some illegal or sinister activity going on. They don't play the game of like, oh, well, I will disclose once there's this or that, or it needs to be under extreme certain circumstances that I can disclose all of what I know, while also paying homage to, or at least being aware of, my NDAs and what I've been approved to say by the government. And then the last thing is he talks about Long Island and the Gilgo beach murders, and the idea that if he's on the good team, then there's this bad team, and this bad team is the people who are responsible for the Gilgo murders. And it opens up an interesting landscape because, like I said before, Eric and I spent a bunch of time looking into military history on Long Island, and it's dense, and it's the top of the top nuclear research dating back to Manhattan Project, the top missile development. It's also like an hour across the water from Boston, where there's a whole other Long Island in Boston has submarine and missile, like the same level of intensity. But Long Island is crazy, and it's historically been a place that is a hotbed of spies, espionage, and the upper echelon of military science and technology. And to think that the Gilgo murders may have been a part of some of this more like MKUltra, SRA, in a smaller example, like a Franklin Bank scandal, elites in these areas either getting their sick sadistic pleasures or having it be some kind of blackmail operation, and that he was aware of it, and maybe like it's kind of alluded to he's involved in it, but not in a bad way. I don't know. It's just it's so much of what is happening now, especially with like the last 2 or 3 years of people coming forward. It's people saying like, yeah, I've seen some really sadistic I didn't partake in it. I've witnessed some horrible things, but I didn't partake in it, but I can tell you who did. That to me seems like a lie. That seems to me like somebody who has knowingly done some fucked up shit, but is trying to cover their ass and make it seem like they, I don't, maybe you can kind of expand on that, but like that's, it's really hard for me to look at a lot of the folks that have come out in that scene in the past couple of years and not think they are literally a misinformation or disinformation agent. You know, we also kind of touched on Borland and the most recent interview he did, which was on Weaponized, right? With George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell. And in that, he straight up talks about how when he was disclosing and having issues, like he went through a process where it was straight MKUltra, Clockwork Orange style programming. So I don't know if any of those things, if you have thoughts on any of those things, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to touch on the Borland thing real quick, and Corbell asked him directly, say, hey, look, I know you can't talk about something, you don't want to talk about something, but let me just ask you, like, do you think you were part of the MKUltra, or there's some thing, and like, is it part of the UAP as a punishment, or was it just, has something else to do with it? And it's, kind of vague. And he's like, well, I will say this, I don't want to believe I have been, but I think I have been a part of it. So like, it's very unclear, like, hey, were you in for this from birth? Was this just as a punishment to try to get you to, off yourself? And I've addressed some of this because he talks about waking up in the middle of the night with a physical urge, so on and so forth. And I've long discussed about how, like, for example, anybody that is in this at a certain level goes through what's called base programming. You have gamma and omega. Gamma is misinformation, disinformation. So say, you have someone that's whistleblowing about something, and they'll basically have a post-hypnotic suggestion that comes in if they make an unauthorized disclosure. Stage 1 will be gamma. That some nonsensical stuff comes in, they will confuse their disclosure. They will talk about some stuff that makes them discredited, to talk about some crazy stuff, or just talk about something that's not true and confuse their disclosure, or confabulate, right? Obfuscate. So anyways, then what will happen is stage 2 goes to omega. So what can happen is in omega, they'll get you in what's called somnambulistic hypnosis, okay? And somnambulism is also known as N3 sleep cycle. That's sleepwalking. So what happens is they'll get you in there to where it's not as much to where it's like coherent thinking, like, oh, you decided, yes, my life sucks and I have to commit suicide, which is an aspect too, because what they do is they will get you with an Ericksonian hypnosis script, which means it goes with your psyche, and they kind of build on like aspects of your life, and they kind of work that into like a situation that can make sense in the moment, and then elicits a lot of feelings. So like at once they get it to where all your feelings spike with no context, and then it makes sense in the moment to do it. But the thing is, they get you in somnambulistic hypnosis to where you're in the sleepwalking phase, and they try to program the suicide programming with somnambulistic hypnosis. So in like a sleepwalking phase, you have the physical urge and it'll just make sense to do it, right? And that's if unauthorized disclosures are happening, and that gamma either didn't work or like isn't severe enough, if they just need to eliminate somebody. So he clearly experienced what was known as omega stage 2 programming activation. So anyways, the other thing is, though, he's, you even hear him talking throughout the thing, and you know what, like, I'm not trying to disparage him by any shape or form. I believe he's doing his best and doing what he needs to do, or doing what he believes he needs to do, and is trying his hardest. But like, he talks about like he's getting advice, from a lawyer. He's like, okay, well, is this what the country needs? Okay, he's still bound to that loyalty. He doesn't understand what's up the chain of the command, who he's really dealing with, right? Just let me touch on a couple of things here. He mentions that when he's in the middle of whistleblowing, or even before, after he had seen the triangle, I think, to where he goes through a situation, he's going to be stationed and he has to get his wisdom teeth taken out. And the pretext for that, the justification for that, is that a lot of people come back from overseas, with dental problems. Okay, well, just so people know that, like, going under the pretext of a dentist is like the number one way that there's the implantation that takes place. And they say implantation is literally can be done with a needle in 2 seconds, to where they shoot an implant, and under the guise of wisdom teeth being taken out is like the most common one.
Perfect
like, that's
cover.
the thing. Okay, it doesn't mean that they don't take the wisdom teeth out. Yeah, they do, and then it also hurts, but there can be complications. They just take the wisdom teeth take out and take it out. Like, that's what happens. Okay, like, I know several people that have went through it. These people, it can be told, if you have an implant, it can be verified. You get them in an anechoic chamber, you get them in a Faraday cage, right? And then what happens is you burst them with a certain frequency. These things are dormant, okay, at first, but then what you can do is you can shoot them with a certain frequency. Then if you have a spectrum analyzer, you can analyze it, and if you burst them with a certain frequency, a lot of them tend to be on the NATO registered band, and then what happens is the frequency will come alive, it will come out of dormancy, and it will burst back. And then what they do is, the way that they burst is they burst in basically kind of like a Morse code. It's not Morse code, but it's encrypted. So anyways, there's implants put in like that, and it can be verified. That's one thing too. Okay, so other than the dentist visit, he's, like, oh, is this what's good for my country? Oh, what's this? He's obviously been scared for his life, things like this. So like, the dude is under duress. He's, limited by feeling like a patriot. He's went through the proper channels. He's already mentioned the proper channels were just a fishing expedition to classify what he's talking about, so he can't talk about it publicly, including his childhood, he mentions. And then also just kind of like tamp down on it. So like, he went through the proper channels. He did what best he could. He also feels like it's duty to where he doesn't want to talk about certain stuff. He puts his faith in the back channels, but also he's limited by the back channels. So what can we learn from his experience? That it sounds like he went through some MKUltra stuff, and he even agrees that going through the proper channels got him to a place where certain stuff was classified and he can't even talk about it, including his childhood, right? And that now, like, he's basically sitting and only can say certain things. So like, there's lessons to be learned from that, okay? So anyways, I wish him the best, but it's, important aspects. So over to this other guy, Gilgo Beach, all this, right? one, that whole exchange between, the SSCI advisor and that whistleblower is embarrassing to me. Here's the deal is, the guy, the whistleblower, has a family. He's worried about his family. I get it. He's got financial vested interests, and, what does he want? He wants a way forward for his comrades that are in this, and the people involved with these programs. He's been around bad stuff. Of course, he's not going to admit to it, whatever. Like, where are we going here? What's the deal with this? No matter what, okay, people don't need to be looking to... People that admit that they're scared or have to comply to something, whether it be NDA, whether it be DOPSR, whether it be their sense of patriotism, whatever it be, they're limited, okay? They're biased. Like, we have to take that into consideration, or don't even listen to him, okay? He's trying to, like, impress the guy, like, oh, you want my guys on it? Oh, yeah, my guys can tell. Oh, they're the best. This and that. Like, get out of here, man. Like, what are you trying to prove? The Gilgo beach murders, here's the deal. I've seen situations that are involved, and, like, I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility. But if you look at the victims, like, okay, where would the connection be? Was there someone in the program that was using the services of these females that leaked information to them? Like, why did they need to go? There could be connections there. There could be a variety of things. There could be passages of rights. Who knows exactly what it was? But, like, ultimately, I just don't see the relevancy. Here's the thing is that, where are we going with this? What's the point? He was trying to get the trust, and get deeper involved with the guy by providing him personal protection services, right? Personal protection detail, right? PPD,
PPD,
whatever. Yeah. What really, like, where were we going with that? It's just like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I have very low respect for, the whistleblower guy just due to other things. I've talked to you about it. Like, I literally, have screenshots of messages where he's, talked to people behind the scenes and tried to involve himself in their operation where they're outing MKUltra stuff. He didn't say anything publicly. He's doing this privately, trying to control it. What else do we know? That he's admitted to red teaming places, come on. Like, he's involved himself with operations.
Including Eric Hecker's disclosure in DC. Like that. The overlap and connection here, when you start to look at it, it looks a whole lot more sinister than people coming forward trying to disclose about UFOs.
Well, yeah, notice this. So first of all, what he did was, and this is bad on Greer and him, and notice that he didn't even warn people about Greer. So even if you mean good and you decided to whistleblow, so he showed Greer something and then got a hold of Greer's incoming whistleblowers and was able to vet Greer's whistleblowers and was able to get his full list of whistleblowers on, just behind the scenes. So he commandeered Greer's entire operation, okay? Greer has zero operational security. He handed everything over. What did he see? Okay. Then what happens is at the conference, which I pulled out of, and I've shown people, the messages too, and I've posted it publicly to where they wanted me to, present alongside Michael Herrera. But notice, everybody at the conference, they had seen things, they had done this and done that, but when it comes to actually some sort of trafficking and moving around humans and then direct contact with his technology, like firsthand up front, that was Herrera. Notice he tries to latch on Herrera. He says, oh, all of a sudden, I decided when I heard Herrera that instead of reporting people to FBI and stuff like this, I'm going to actually talk to this person and involve himself. So he latched onto the one story that kind of had a criminal element to it that was like really like not interpretable. Like, yes, Eric had stuff to where it was like, hey, this weapon can be used for this and all that, but that's different from human trafficking. Like, that's still Eric's thing is a little bit more obscure and all that. So yeah, he, got alongside Herrera and then is basically feeding him information and changing it, and then eventually turns into whitewashing and like making it less of a criminal element, right? And all that. So it's like, come on, man. His whole thing is to insert himself into key areas and then commandeer and control the information, okay? Yeah, and he's been doing this publicly. He's admitted to it, but then even on the back end, it's just complete BS. Okay. Even the organization, like, what are they doing? What are they doing? How is this going to help disclosure? Everything's changed and
exactly.
settle down.
What is the point point of this?
We're going to log stuff in the sky and then get data and then classify it. And this is disclosure. Cool. That's not disclosure. Like, first of all, what is disclosure? You want the authorities, you want the government to tell you what exists and what doesn't. Like, what do people actually look to the government for to tell them about stuff? No, like, that's stupid. Like, you look to the government to pave the roads and take care of like transportation and like basic stuff so you don't have to worry about that. Like, you don't look to the government for all of that. Like, come on, what are we even talking about here? So it's like, it's just absolutely ridiculous on its face. People are so caught up in credentials and hearing about this and that and desperate for something that they're willing to take anything. You have these people, they're put forward to minimally tick boxes, just enough to satiate the people and to satiate the people that would dissent and that would demand more and that would stand up and fight. So they have just enough boxes are ticked minimally just to satiate them. Meanwhile, where they slip in the next thing. That's it. So like, I don't even understand why people pay any attention to that. And another thing is a lot of this is like, there's like bots, and not just bots, but there's other actors to where like people are like, oh yeah, let's interview this, blah, 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 blah. A lot of the journalists and a lot of the like large social media accounts that are involved with this, that are like, pushing all these questions and all that, like they're on the same page because a lot of these are in chats again from the official channels. And like, they are like, okay, yes, we'll all kind of get on board and do our version of this. And, they're told just enough to make it feel like they're not being controlled, and they're told them just enough lies to where it's like, seems like, hey, they're getting the scoop, and it's not like they're outright being ordered to where then they make the decision themselves. And it's not like quite a hard rule, but it's an unwritten rule. And then they don't want to like lose that access to the inside, so they kind of play ball. But again, it's just like it's easily managed. People are easily managed, right? a little bit of inside information, a little bit of like access to exclusive groups, and a little bit of monetary gain.
Done.
Exactly. So anyways, like there's nothing to it. It doesn't matter. It's going nowhere. Like these people, it's stupid. They're not serious people. I'm sorry. Even if he's done some serious things and was involved with this, where is he going? Where is he going with this? And then again, like, these people all get into the like, oh, we have to be positive. We have to do this. We have to do that. Like, that's all being pushed. And like, yes, I believe in like love first and foremost. Like, that's the power of the universe, right? Like, like I'm all for it. I'm all for love and light and all this. But love and light isn't covering up crimes against humanity, especially children. Okay.
Yeah. 100%.
And then they're like, they have things like, for example, they were talking about like, okay, well, it's not human trafficking because the people from third world countries that they recruit as psionic assets, they're taken care of better than the rest.
We're giving them a better life.
And blah, 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 blah. Right. Okay, well, here's the parts that they don't tell you, okay? One is that these people from third world countries, the reason that they're took from third world countries, and this is also happening domestic too, mind you, but a lot of these people in third world countries, guess what? They're put through occult initiations in these certain things, because a lot of these third world countries and stuff like this have like witch doctors and things like this, to where they put them through certain occult initiations. And a lot of these people that are psionic assets, and I want you to know that all of these public psionic assets have been either through the MKUltra or another other initiatory processes. There's certain invocations and certain connections that they have with certain things that are established, and they're being pulled from an occult lifestyle and then inserted to it. That's built up already in the developmental phase. The other aspect is that for the people that they do pull in, like even if they like, oh, they're getting a better life and stuff like that, these people are under literal mind control. They've been behavioral modified. And you can't make free will choices when you've been through this brainwashing process. And when you're brainwashed and you're like, oh, they're accepting and they're willing to do this in a better life, like they've been brainwashed, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you talking about? How can you leave that part out? It's just so crazy. And then the other aspect is that for every successful person that eventually gets into the governmental position, whether it's government, NGO, whatever, that is tied in with these programs officially. For every one of those, there's tons of them that were horribly damaged and either end up dead, suicided, or in mental institutions. Okay. Yeah. So like, I mean, who are we kidding here? Like, this is not love and light. This is not positive aspects. We are zoning in and showing you one selective small part of this to paint a picture with limited context and whitewash the situation in order to move on and stop you from looking. It's complete, and these people should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you, and I do agree that, like, yeah, there are some of the actors are clearly behaving in a more nefarious way than others. There are definitely a few people that have come forward where I'm of the mind, like you're saying, how they're unwittingly contributing to it based on their programming or their experience that led them there. And there are very few people that are in a position enough to have access to that kind of information and willing to risk it all. And, you know, I it's not to say that I'm also of the mindset that I want to hear it. Even if I find it to be bullshit, I still want to hear it, because you can just kind of uncover the scope or the real context of the lie or what they're contributing to it. But yeah, it's hard for me to look at any of it and be like, this love and light, what love and light? I'm right there with you. Yes, that is the true underlying source of the universe, energy in the universe, right? But I'm really skeptical to think that somebody is about that when they've only worked for Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman. Those companies don't care at all about love and light. In fact, their whole business model is the opposite. So it's just hard for me to, whenever any of those people talk about, you know, doing the ultimate good or like being some kind of like white knight, white hat scenario, it's just hard for me to accept that there isn't some kind of hidden agenda. So this whole scenario is very stupid. It's very shameful. And it really bothers me that more people don't catch on to it. But again, when I think about the mechanism that exists for the general controlling of the average civilian's perception, I also like cut people a little bit of slack, in the sense that it's like, you're up against a real big monster, and it takes, as somebody who tries to deprogram myself every day, I am still subjected to that programming. Like, there's still levels of that anyone, even if you're working on it daily, like, they got us good. And, rolling out of that is not necessarily easy. It's definitely not fun. And you run into that problem where you start explaining deprogramming to somebody who's deep in the program, and all of a sudden you're an enemy. Like, you're a threat, a serious problem. So I understand why even just general citizens don't want to accept that maybe these things are the case. But, I do. There is one thing I do want to ask you too before I forget. Have you seen the movie Mysterious Skin?
I have not.
It's a movie with Gordon Joseph Levitt. And in that movie, he has a friend who thinks he was abducted by aliens. And spoiler alert, through the end of the movie, you find out that his friend's image of being abducted in his mind was a construction to hide the fact that he was being sexually abused by his PE teacher. Right? Is terribly sad, and it's based somewhat in reality. That is a real thing. It's also like tons of history and medical research about that. Those psychological defense mechanisms that get built to, like, entrap a traumatizing event. But there's a part of me that, when I look at like the satanic panic and the connection of a lot of the people that got embroiled in that, and their connection to the military, and even, but to a lesser extent, the connection between serial killers of 70s and 80s and their connection to the military. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on like these things being how am I looking to describe this? There's a part of me that feels like each of those things were parts clandestine or domestic groups that went awry with it. I don't know if I'm able to like articulate the point that I'm trying to make here, but there's like this idea that maybe all of this is an unintended consequence of the shit that they were doing. Maybe they weren't trying to program people to become serial killers. Just some of the people that underwent that programming snapped and became serial killers. They weren't necessarily trying to abuse or terrorize an entire generation of people, but it was a byproduct of the fact that they were trying to do it to some people, and then it, butterflies outward. And in some way, I can't help but think that, especially when you look at like the psychological damage that was done during the Satanic Panic in both actual instances or not actual instances, just like the West Memphis 3 that gets loaded into the Satanic Panic, but those kids it wasn't necessarily, I don't know if there was any connection to military there, but it gets lumped in there because it was in the early 90s and the kids were into metal or whatever. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on like the interconnections of, before we even get down the rabbit hole of like UFO stuff, how the civilian or average person has gotten looped into these things over the past 20 or 30 years.
Right. Well, I mean, I will say, I mean, when you get into like the serial killers and all this, and then even how you said like how the guy was like, kind of turning sexual into like an abduction. Well, I guess just first going to the serial killer stuff, like one, if people want to look at like Dave McGowan's Program to Kill or Podocracy, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, yeah, there's a heavy tie into these like MKUltra type programs, right? I mean, it's, unmistakable. And like you were saying, like, so, okay, was the key to make serial killers, or was it just like a unintentional byproduct? The same could be asked about school shootings. Like, was this exactly what they wanted? And there are like good things. And that's also separate from the fact that says, hey, whether this was the deliberate, the desire and the goal, or whether this was an unintended byproduct, it's a separate situation from, okay, well, once this happened, either way, whether it's deliberate or a byproduct, did they try to spin it to their advantage any way possible? Right. Because like, don't let a tragedy go to waste. Right.
Right.
So,
exactly,
yeah, I mean, I only have so much. I mean, due to the way the serial killings stopped, I mean, if it wasn't unintentional, then, if it was like on purpose, right? Well, then they must have had a reason to stop and change to the new phase, because it largely stopped in a way to where like it changed the focus, whether it be media or the actual occurrences, I will say this just about the serial killers and stuff like this, because obviously when it comes to MKUltra and this sort of thing, like, I have extra insight about this. A large part of what was going on with the serial killers, again, I don't know what was deliberate and what wasn't, is that they were getting people addicted to killing, okay? Because there was essentially like when you're programming and learning how to program people. So, say you can have some sleeper spies, and then if they need, you can activate them to kill. They need that to be reliable. Okay. And like, what's the minimal amount of conditioning dealing with firsthand experience that you can have to where someone can be reliable? Because if you want someone to be an unwitting sleeper, but also be reliable to kill someone, well, like, okay, do we have to kill them first to test it? And what's the minimum amount they do? Because like, then you're just like creating bodies and stuff like that, right? So like, there was definitely like an aspect of them programming people, and there was like a lot of this had to do with like addiction to opiates, to where they would essentially drug people where they didn't know they were being drugged, and then, show them like horrible films with murder and stuff like this. And then like essentially what they were doing was they were getting addicted to opiates, but not knowing it was opiates. So then like kind of like a bell thing, like when they would see the killing and they were like essentially getting them hooked to killing. They were like doing a bait and switch with opiates and, murder essentially, which is like terrifying. But so like there was a large aspect of that. So like, okay, like I believe that like the whole serial killer fiasco wasn't intended to happen so much publicly and all that it was a byproduct of them not having totally refined the program to where they can have sleeper spies that are willing to kill on command, right? And that they finally fine-tuned that to where it was successful in a different way, or they eliminated parts of the program that were just making too much of a mess, right?
Right, yeah. Too much to clean up, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it just found, okay, what's working, what isn't, hey, like, okay, enough of this and moving on, right? So whatever it was, it moved forward. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with too much of this. As far as what you touched on though about like the movie and the person like seeing an alien and stuff like that, like or an abduction or whatever, like that's a thing. That's a thing. And a lot of people that underwent this that was expounded upon, whether that's like a unintentional thing. Like sometimes people just like their brain will go to certain places to be able to cope, to be able to deal with it. It's a mental defense. And like these certain aspects that the brain naturally does, those are identified and then expounded upon and then used wherever they can be. Like, oh, hey, this is a characteristic of the brain. Like if they're going through this, especially if it's someone close or trusted and they don't want to deal with it and they'll tend to do this, okay, like that's just something that happens. So, hey, how can we utilize that? Is that something we can utilize? Does it make any sense? And where could that fit into the puzzle? Or do we need to try to work around it or avoid it, So that's just one of many things. But yeah, a lot of people, as far as the like abductions and stuff like that, a lot of it is expounded to where it's not just the mental defense to where people are naturally gravitating towards somewhere else. Like they're specifically told this in deep hypnosis and stuff like this. People will
to create a specific image. Yeah,
exactly. To where it's essentially masked. Some people, might like say, hey, I saw a gray alien and I was just froze. It telepathically froze me and then was, doing this and doing that. But really it can be their body went into shock and froze up in a fight or flight. But it was or fight or flight or freeze, right? It just froze, because they had, it linked them back to, childhood torture or something like that. So like, there's different aspects of that, but, I don't know where I'm going on this side, and I lost track exactly of what the question was.
Well, there wasn't a real question. It was just like a lot of kind of random thoughts about that, but you definitely like, I'm of the same mindset that why did the serial killings stop? Like, why don't we have serial killers like that? And yes, there's an argument that we stop criminals from being able to do that faster. But why did they emerge really at a specific time in a specific tri-county area in California, like where a majority of the biggest names in serial killing were serial killing? Mm-hmm. And then it just stops and it's not really a thing that gets talked about. Yes, there are serial killers in America, but it doesn't really get talked about. I'm of the mindset that, whatever process that wasn't working. So they changed the process. So they had less of this issue of these guys like going rogue and just like literally being addicted to killing whatever they could get their hands on. And then definitely with the satanic panic, like there's parts of it that I can't help but look at it and be like, this was like yes, it was psychological torture to the people that underwent any of those experiences. But as a whole, I think it was also a psychological operation to like mess with even the people that didn't. Just, a further erosion of like, you can't trust your neighbor, you can't trust your pastor, you can't trust anybody because anyone could be a Satanist. It's like an evolution of the Red Scare, soon to be alien. Like you can't, your neighbor might be an alien, so you can't trust him. So.
Well, back then too, a lot of people don't know this, but like way back when the Satanic Panic was going on, like there was a huge link up with UFO stuff. That's what people that don't seem to remember.
Really? Even back then?
Oh, huge. It was a major thing. And here's another aspect too that a lot of people don't know is just like for the record is that there was 4 states with statutes for whether it be ritualized of a child or this or that. So there's like Utah, I think Montana, Illinois. I don't know. I have them again also on my X account. But guess what? There was in all the statutes, maybe 3 out of 4, maybe all 4, but at least 3 out of 4 of the statutes, there was an exemption for government research projects. So why is there an exemption for government research projects in the ritualized? But yeah, so there was a lot of benefits for the powers that be in some of this, like you said, like, you know, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of not trust. What do you have to do? Don't trust your neighbor, don't talk to your neighbor, worry about just one source from authority and go to them. And like, yeah, there's a lot of benefits from that. And just the more generally scared, and uncertain you have the populace, the easier it is to feed them what you want and to control them. But yeah, back then, tons of the UFO stuff and all that, like it was deeply tied in with this. And also like, here's what a lot of people, may not want to accept is, you have different aspects of this. Yes, it gets, out there and all that. But, whether you have Parsons, right, with the JPL, with this, and, you have like, obviously he was doing some rituals,
Jack
with the
Parsons,
Crowley stuff. Yeah. And then obviously he was linked up with Hubbard and stuff like this. Like, here's the deal is that, it's been a long thing, like going way back. And you can look at John Dee, which was like, one of the Queen Elizabeth's advisors, and like, the original 007. That's how he signed his thing. It was the eyes of the Queen. He had 2 dots and like a 7. It was just like a line. But they call him the original 007 and this and that. But like, and he started what was known as, he's credited for, Enochian magic and all that. And like, so some of these even modern day people that are supposedly using psionics to summon crafts and stuff like that, they also are using Enochian things. And like, there's been protocols to contact with non-human intelligence, okay? This goes back to the occult methods, like they are doing certain things, okay? And just to touch on this, because as long as we're talking about all this, like, I've explained part of it like this, like there you see this much of the spectrum and there's this much of the spectrum. So there's a lot that we can't see. And then even things that you can see, some are like microscopic, like, parasites that like affect your biome, your gut biome, or, and control stuff. You have like cat fecal matter parasites, right? You have all sorts of stuff that are known to like affect behavior, and, they'll get in something and map out their brains and, touch all the different things to see the possibilities and then control them however they can. But the point being is that like some of these people, these occult practitioners, use protocols, communication protocols to contact non-human intelligence. And, there's a lot of speculation that that's how some people have got this knowledge going into some of these advanced aerospace programs to identify physics, to do this. You talk about reverse engineering materials. There's, a lot of talk about people remote viewing and using kind of like the psychic side of things, but also communing with non-human intelligence in order to see what they can do to make development. So like this is a whole very woo-ish aspect of this. But it's an infinite universe. There's a lot out there. And an interesting aspect about all this is like people essentially being cosmic fishermen and using different sorts of bait, different sorts of lure, whether it be frequencies, smells, colors, shapes, symbols, just protocols, communication protocols in order to communicate with something that's out there, to call it. How do you call this thing up? And that crosses over again into, the Satanic Panic. They're doing these rituals, they're doing these things, they're doing the commune, and just like, people's like, okay, well, sacrifice is always, done to this. Well, what happens when something sacrificed and someone passes? They cross over, and there's kind of like, depending what you believe, you're going to believe that, someone's going to the afterlife or to somewhere else. Like there is an energetic transfer, and say you get them in a sealed, Faraday cage, an anechoic chamber, like, can that be measured with certain instrumentation? But anyway, So the point is that like, the communication with non-human intelligence, whether you call it demons, whether you call it angels, whether you call it whatever you want to call it, that is inherently tied to occult practices, whether that be satanic, whether you want to label it as something else. So there's something there. That's, there's a lot of that activity there, and it is bound to it. So another thing is that you notice like these people that are involved in these programs and are at the top of certain industries, they tend to be involved with certain orders or certain societies and take part in this stuff. Like, this isn't anything new. The terminology we're using is new. The terminology has kind of been whitewashed, and the nomenclature, the theme has been a little bit switched to make it palatable. But like, this isn't anything new. This is stuff that has been going on for a long time, and now they're kind of repackaging it for public consumption and trying to get people interested in a way to where they'll dive in when people really don't know what they're messing with. So that's just like another whole element to this whole thing. But again, before we even get into any of that and all that, I'm more about like, hey, let's deal with the down-to-earth stuff, just with basic stuff and trauma. They're brainwashing people, right? So like, again, before you get into the truth about anything that's out there, non-human intelligence, or, obscure occult protocols and all this, right? Like, we have crimes against humanity, crimes against children that are right in front of us to deal with. Yeah. So like, and we'll never get past that. If we don't get past the very human blockade of corruption, right? We'll never get to any of the rest of it. But that's just, there's interesting, and there's a strong connection, between these rituals and occult practices and what's going on in all aspects of the disclosure of the UAP movement. So
that's super interesting, and I didn't ever put that together. It makes complete sense, and it also makes sense why they're trying. Like, when I got into most of the UFO stuff was like late 90s, when the internet comes around and I was old enough to like search the internet. And there was no crossover of like the angels and demons. But now in this wave of disclosure, it feels like that agenda is being pushed pretty heavily. Now I have a guy who I've had on the show, Ike Baker, shout out Ike, who's a deep esotericist, and he really hates the UAP alien label, because he's like, esotericists have been communing with disembodied intelligences for centuries. Like, there's a ton of recorded experiences that people were having, and like you're saying, using these specific type of protocols to engage with this or that entity. And it is just funny to see it kind of in the modern context be like fit into this materialist science fiction, view of it, or explanation of it. And, I'm kind of the same mind. To me, it doesn't matter if it's alien or if it's angels and demons. To me, that's literally semantics. We're getting into just a debate of like what word you're using. And it goes back to, again, like why I think the government doesn't give a shit about controlling your, or trying to make sense of what you believe of the they don't really give a shit. That's not a concern of theirs. At least this government. Some governments that are more connected with the religion, maybe, but not in this country. But I just can't help but, for me, I just can't help but see, even as I'm saying that now, it does get kind of weird, because what makes our country different than many other countries is that, I'm sure we have a lot of people in the government and military that are Christian, but we also allow anyone from any belief system. It's like it's how we get people like Michael Aquino, Temple of Set, like pure Satanist in high positions of in the military. But I just I kind of lost my thread here. Let me kind of tail it back. For me, I can't understand how people get caught up in like it's angels or it's aliens. Like, for me, why they're keeping this secret and why they're being so secretive about how they're disclosing this information is purely human culpability. It's like we were talking about before. We can't sue aliens. We definitely can't sue angels or demons or God yet. That's not a thing we can do. But we can sue companies. And if any of these companies start talking about, like, even in terms of just like the lunar program or any of the programs that are now fully declassified, there's acknowledgement of like, yeah, we were dealing with chemicals, and some of those chemicals, they polluted the land, and we had to create these, safety zones. There's a ton of that mentioned in the nuclear stuff. There's also the very famous case from Area 51 where those employees sued the government because they would take airframes to a burn pit, cover it in jet fuel, and then light them on fire. And then people were inhaling those fumes and getting cancer, and then trying to sue the government, but the government didn't acknowledge that Area 51 existed, so they couldn't sue the government, even though they could prove that the reason that they got cancer was from the government. Anyways, that to me is like a great example, and the fact that it's at Area 51 ties it back to the UFO hilariously, but like that's why they don't want to talk about this. That's why they don't want us to understand the truth. Even if we understand the prosaic history of like, yeah, we developed this cutting edge technology and here are the processes we use. Just them saying these were the processes they used, they're going to have to admit that they poisoned people that were around that area.
Oh yeah.
And again, that's they're willing to abuse generations of people. They're willing to psychologically damage anyone, and they're absolutely willing, just like any other government on this planet is willing to kill people to keep that secret so that they don't, like, dude, if the general citizen found out about even more than we already know, like the rampant drugging of people or poisoning of our own citizens that we've done in the name of like government research, if we became slightly more aware of that, we would take up pitchforks. We'd be building guillotines. And that's why so much effort has gone into like making us think it's this one thing, this existential threat that we can't do anything about. I don't know. For me, it doesn't. People try to make it more complex, and it doesn't even need to be more complex than that. They just don't want to be held responsible for objectively sinister that any reasonable person anywhere in any country would say that's horrible and those people deserve to be locked in prison forever, killed in the town square. This is kind of expanding on it, but we were talking about this too before the pod. A lot of these things that we're looking at now that we've talked about in this show are continuations of Nazi programs. Like, we literally took all the scientists, as many as we could grab, and we brought them over here and we let them continue their research, gave them positions, authority positions in the government and business, in every level of the administration of the future of our country. And it just has to, like, if they were doing wicked there, what makes us think that they stopped? I don't know. For me, that's a simple answer. They didn't stop. We just let them continue doing it, and some of the humans in America became the test subjects. And we won't ever know the full extent of that, because most of the included with MKUltra was destroyed. And the CIA director's like on record basically saying like, oh yeah, we burned those. Because if the average person found out, we would be building guillotines and picking up pitchforks. So
no, absolutely.
Any thoughts in that direction that you have?
Yeah, no, so here's the thing too, is, you get into this, what are the powers and principalities that be? I always like adding principalities in there, right? What are the powers that be really doing here? One, they're trying to keep the focus on anything as obscure as possible. Okay. So like, yes, always NHI. Yeah. Yes. We have phenomena. Yes, it's way out there. But then at the same time, they're also trying to divide as much as possible. Obscure phenomena, all that, you can't put your finger on it. Just endless questions. You're never getting anywhere. And then, okay, you say, why do these bureaucrats always say, it's angels and demons? And then you have people dividing like, they're just closed-minded religious zealots, blah, 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 blah. So like, okay, you're dividing people. you can't get enough people to unite to demand for answers, right? You have the people fighting amongst themselves. So basically, keep the focus as fuzzy, as blurry, and as obscure as possible. Good for them. Keep the people fighting about a subject and, create sides. Good, also good, and that's just, it's endless, right? And, like in reality, people try to box stuff in, one, naturally, just so they can understand it. Like, I get that. But aliens, demons, this isn't an unlimited universe, right? I'm sure that out there somewhere there is physical forms, there's non-physical forms, there's physical forms that can communicate non-physically as well, right? Like there's going to be a wide variety of intelligences and manifestations out there, right? So I mean, it's one of those things. Like, people want a tidy answer and to fit it in a box, when really there's unlimited out there. If we're getting to what are we really dealing with right here, that's another thing, right? Okay, is it reptilians? Is it grays? Is it Nordics? All that. Yeah, they want to worry about that. Again, we have a blockade of very down to earth, simple humans with corruptions. And you talk about these Nazi programs continued. Already there's been a very mixed up bag, because you have people that are playing both sides of the war and stuff like this. But again, if you go back to the the paperclip at the end of World War II is really when stuff hit the fan, and all these programs got industrialized, and there was a big kind of a unification behind the scenes of powers, right? And what happened from that, it goes hand in hand. These Nazi experiments, behavioral modification, okay, hugely, MKUltra brainwashing, hugely, and then also advanced physics and advanced aerospace and rocketry, right? That's really that's all one package. And that's what we're dealing with here. This is all coming to a head, and they want to do anything they can to avoid answering for it. Like you were saying, people couldn't even get answers about, the poisoning in conjunction, associated with Area 51. They wouldn't even tell people what they were burning, because then they claim oh, hey, if we tell you this, it might not be anything, but if people take this information for what they were burning, then this element, they might be able to kind of get a better picture. The enemy might be able to get a better picture of what we're building. Whatever. Whatever. The point is, though, what they don't want is people putting two and two together, okay? And there are these groups that have long been going, but especially formed after World War II, and these same groups that are a conglomerate from people around the world, and different vested interests, they come together, and what do is they're locking down the people that are involved with these programs, the material that are involved with these programs, the physics that are involved in these programs, every aspect with it, and completely compartmentalizing it, right? And, it's just, I mean, at the end of the day, people have to just look at this really simply and rationally, okay? If you're looking for answers to non-human intelligence and spiritual and religious implications, you'd never go to the government for that. Yes, I know some governments are tied in with religion,
no, but
and
100%.
some are less tolerant of different religions and stuff like that. I get that, but that's not the government's territory.
Right, it's never been their role.
Don't look for them for answers. Are you kidding? The government again is people that change within it and stuff like this. That's not who's going to have all the answers and stuff. What do we want? We want the answers of, hey, there's stuff flying around. There's stuff flying around, all that. I mean, that's what I'm saying. What do people really want? What can you expect realistically for the government to give you a hard answer on? Okay, yes, we have advanced craft, that we have made from advanced materials of capabilities, and it's all classified. Well, I mean, duh. Of course. When was the last major public release of a super advanced mainstream aircraft, right? Of course they have stuff that they've been working on and all that. And you better believe it. Look just in the past couple of decades of what's happened with cellular phones in your pocket.
Yeah,
and,
sure,
and computers getting smaller and smaller, right? So apply some of that to aircraft and just use common sense. They have stuff out there. They're never going to tell you everything. And just like with everything else, they're, if they do tell you, it's going to be kind of to skew things towards their direction. Here's the thing is, if they're trying to avoid culpability, They're trying to avoid culpability, and again, the government's just a conglomerate of people and stuff like this. People have to look beyond government. Really? You're looking at banking families and you're looking at these aerospace families. You're looking at who has the power through technology and who has the power through finances, right? Like, this is what you're looking. That's really where the concentration is. And these are the people that have been lobbying the government. They've been controlling this and controlling things since way back. Again, the bankers were funding both sides of World War II, right? So if you're looking for these answers, people need to look realistically, who is government, what is government, and what's going on. And then you see some of these family dynasties that are all in here and stuff like that. The point is that people need to take some responsibility and stop thinking everything's going to be given to them and handed to them. People need to get realistic. It sucks. Look, there's no free pass. You're not going to get it all handed to you from the government. There's no happily ever after like that. Just stand up and set a standard and demand it. And don't be looking to people that have vested interest for the truth. Okay. It's just if you're looking for people to give you the answers, you don't want people that still have government contracts, that are only speaking according to NDA, that are only speaking to DOPSR, that have a family, that have openly talked about that they're scared and stuff like this. You have people oh yeah, this will happen. They leaked this about my medical record, and poor me. Come on, man. We all know that they've been killing people that really are trying to go against the powers that be, that are really corrupt and all that. If you really look into this, going back to again, World War II and stuff, an underworld, they absorbed the mafia, they're controlling the dirty trades. We funneled the Nazi paperclip scientists into our aerospace programs. And also these are the same people that went into Disney and, our media. And it's just it's not that complicated. It's really unfortunate to face and all that, but hey, there's some bad people that are in charge of this stuff and they're never going to tell you the truth. Okay. What do we know? That's and who's willing to go there? I don't know. I'm talking in circles here because it's just simple. It's the bottom line is they're brainwashing people, right? Especially these people that are forward facing the public, and they're presenting it to you. Look carefully at who's saying what, and you see these common threads. These people have childhood experiences, these people, have common threads, and then you look parallel to MKUltra, and you say, oh, hey, that's kind of been known to come up. That's really what it all is I'm sorry, but if you look to the techniques of MKUltra and what came from that, and then you look at the resources for that, through the therapeutic community and through the survivor community and all that, they've been telling the answer for decades, right? They're using aliens, they're using everything to obscure the fact. Yes, I'm sure there's some stuff out there,
Yeah,
there's
100%.
all that, that's a thing too. But the bottom line is, you're never going to be told the truth from the government. The people that are involved with these programs and what's going on now is just a script. They're only letting the people up that are adhering to that script or not spilling too much. And then they're focusing the media on that. And then any real truth that's coming up, they're trying to water it down with a bunch of bull. But I don't know. All I'm going to do at this point is repeat myself. Hey, all the headliners are brainwashed. Well, what I'm saying?
This is good. And I felt like that definitely over the past. I have always said that, even before I had a podcast and I was the weird guy at the party, I was always the guy that was I'm saying all these things, but I think it's important that we have to recognize it could all be. There have been times in the past 2 years where I feel like I'm just talking in circles, but this is, if the tools being used against us are neurolinguistic programming to tell us it's aliens, then what people like you or I need to do is use tools like neurolinguistic programming to widen someone's vernacular. I'm okay if you want to entertain that it's aliens, just as long as you're also simultaneously entertaining that it just. That is the more appropriate way to deal with anything, much less a crazy topic like this. So I don't, you should never feel bad about that. I don't, for sure. And that's, the more people hear it, the more it becomes a part of people's understanding of these things. And it's important. Like, again, beyond just aliens, I don't believe anything on its face value. And typically when I hear something that doesn't sound right, the first thing I do is read what the opposing idea thinks of that. It just by nature of like, okay, I'm going to read a pro and against, and then I'm going to find the negative space in between. That's probably where more of the truth lies. It's not going to be just reading that one source or hearing that one story. I actually want to hear the opposing side, because when I combine both of them, I'm going to get at least some of the truth, more so than if I were to just read either side or consume either argument. But I want to make sure too, we touch on this before we go, because this has been a kind of newer thing, the GATE program, right? So in the past couple of years, it's come up, it's surfaced up on social media that maybe the GATE program was more than just a in-school divergence for people who were tapped off as being gifted. And even as a kid, I thought, that's a little f***ed. They're like isolating these children immediately and telling them that they're gifted. Like, is that going to f*** something up in me psychologically? And I was a part of the GATE program. And even as a kid in the GATE program, I was like, why am I here? I'm not gifted. I'm average. I'm an average individual. I'm not gifted. I don't possess any unique powers. I'm just an average student. Like, my grades are average. I'm an average the school doesn't, I wasn't there to try and like excel and get straight A's and be at the top of the class. I didn't give a So it always sat with me weird. But then in the past couple of years, having it come up that like, yeah, sure, this is an evolution of an MKUltra thing, then that starts to make sense. What easier way to filter out people for these programs than by having classes in the school that identify these abilities early on, and then filter them appropriately through schools under the tutelage of teachers who were aligned with those ideas, and into a bunker somewhere in some black program or in some obscure aspect of government that their unique skill set applies to. So I'm just wondering if you could kind of explain to people who aren't aware of this, the whole GATE, the recent development of like what was the GATE program, and then kind of expand on like what that means for not only people that were in it, but for anyone who grew up around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say for the record, so, I've been public behind the scenes. I supplied evidence to the proper channels with other people about GATE and regional equivalents, because you have just gifted and talented. You have, pull-out programs, everything under that umbrella. So I've been going on about this for over a decade, literally. And, that's part of what I started the main focus with organized safety on, was that was like a really readily available vector to identify subjects of these programs from, was GATE, because that was like a sure thing. Not everybody in GATE. There was, other people funneled outside of GATE. Like there'll be a lot of people that GATE that just, dealt with like run of the mill, like standard, like just, whatever they were doing at GATE, whether it be Oregon Trail and, this and that or whatever. But again, a lot of choice people got funneled out of there. So here's the things to understand. What is GATE? Well, first of all, it's under the National Defense Education Act. National Defense Education.
Interesting.
Act, okay. All right. And that was launched in response to Sputnik, against Cold War era, right? We had to have people ready for the, science, technology,
the next wave of science,
everything.
Space.
Yeah. Mathematics, so like, that's like the whole thing was like, this is National Defense Education Act. Okay. And then you had Project Talent, and Project Talent was essentially identifying people. It's a lifelong monitoring thing too, by the way, Project Talent. And, then there was Project Talent, and there's Talent, and there's various modalities of that, okay? And then you have a lot of, like, third-party that come in and kind of, like, do the transfer to these funneled sub-projects from GATE. But so it's not just, like, intelligent in one area. There's a lot of different ways to be intelligent. You can be intelligent logically. You can be intelligent in math. You can be artistic and creative, left brain, right brain. There's all sorts of different aspects, right? So it's important to understand that. Nowadays, the way it's coming out with GATE, it's really been focused on what they say is like, oh, hey, some people got tested for psi abilities, right? Okay, sure. Sure they did. And even if you even look in 1997, and I had posted these articles, and I've been posting this way back because, I've been on this, and was looking for anything to support it. You could see, the Eagle Forum, had an article titled, Gifted and Talented Program Raises Concerns. And essentially it was going through because essentially what they did was the Monroe Gateway program and things associated with that. That was the curriculum. So that got typed up in a thing and people were like, hey, this is concerning. They're doing this. They're also computerized, keeping a log of everybody in this and their answers. So what is this for? And is this what Jacob Javits had in mind whenever, he signed this bill? Because you have the Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Education Act, and that's in most states. That's not every single state, but Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Education Act, that's in most states, and then in other states it's supplemented by other things. But it's also important to note that Jacob Javits was involved with MKUltra as well. So if you go look into this, that's an important aspect to know. You start putting two and two together. Project Talent was Flanagan, okay? So John C. Flanagan made Project Talent, which is identifying people who go into GATE and other programs, right? And then you had Plan Program, which was computerized adjusting curriculum to where, don't get me wrong, it might not be their whole curriculum. They might have everything except for just GATE is different. But then you have some people that had a whole mapped out curriculum if they got completely took and put in, whether they skipped forward in grades or whether they went to a secondary school or whatever it was. So it's important to note, look, John C. Flanagan, he was in World War II, I believe. He was in charge for aviation psychology. He was selecting our combat fighter pilots. Okay. So that's one of the most strenuous positions that and you're in charge of the most expensive equipment, right? If you crash an expensive airplane, right? That's one of the most
to know your sound mentally.
Yeah, exactly.
Or behave a specific way. Yeah,
exactly. So he was in charge of that. So John C. Flanagan then went on to do talent to where, he's selecting combat fighter pilots and then he's selecting gifted and talented children, right? So what's really funny too is you look at, and you hear Gates about these psi abilities and all this. You look at the, the Gate articles and the concerns, and that they were doing Monroe Institute, stuff. They were also doing Silva method stuff. Jose Silva, had backgrounds in the Army and stuff like that, which is self-hypnosis methods like that. Monroe Institute, we know that they had government contracts. Okay. Yeah. So also what's funny is that so Flanagan, who made Project Talent, who picked the children for GATE, he also was in charge of AIR, which is American Institute for Research. AIR is who was contracted to do the final evaluation of Stargate. And when Stargate shut down in 1995, AIR, founded by John C. Flanagan, was the one that determined that they didn't make any actionable intelligence and it wasn't worth doing. Okay? So you have the person, John C. Flanagan, who made Project Talent, who picked the kids that go into this Monroe Institute type program that involved with remote viewing and everything, who then had the other company, AIR, who was in charge of saying that it did nothing, that it didn't work.
Did nothing.
So again, you have what's called, this is completely contained. You have the same in-house people, only certain people are read in on and need to know. So you have the same people that pull the people in, same people that determined through another company, right? But it's still the same founder, that, that this wasn't worthwhile. So that's very interesting here. So the important aspect though is that, gate and funnel out, you have regional equivalents, you have pull out enrichment, period, whatever they call it. You have gate, way back in the day was MGM, starting in California first. And you have all this iffy curriculum. You have John C. Gowan, who was the kind of godfather, grandfather of the curriculum, and he made all these books about mysticism and essentially was taking occult initiations and occult practices and all the different dissociative trance states that elicit all these phenomena, and he basically applied scientific nomenclature to them, and basically went through a curriculum that could be given to children. And then this also went into Dabrowski, which is called positive disintegration method. Essentially this is just putting people through a certain development at key points while they're children and making dissociative states, right? And then breaking them down into a complete, just completely shattering a brick wall and then rebuilding it into a pyramid. So all this, if you look into GATE and you look into John C. Gowan and you look into Dabrowski and all these people, you see that basically like what they were looking at was taking gifted and talented children, especially those with creative and artistic right brain ability, and essentially putting them through a process that will essentially cause, dissociation and then structuring their development in a key way, right? So like it's very interesting. That was one aspect of it. Yes, you have people routed into different areas, whether it be for mathematics, whether it be for this, whether that. And again, it's also important to note that all the curriculum was guided by NSA CSS. Okay, this all falls under NSA and CSS, and you can even match up the GATE curriculum with specific NSA. Like I've even posted some of the old documents were from NSA website, and there's like the whole plan and stuff. It was hard to get, but I have some of that posted somewhere on there too. But anyways, long story short is that this has been whitewashed to where they say, okay, GATE was testing for psi abilities and funneling certain children after the hearing test, after the pink drink, after all this, and they were just testing them, and that's kind of what it was, that some went through that, and then some think that they went on to be psionic assets or whatever. But at large, in reality, it went much deeper than that. What GATE was testing was for, of course, again, there's also just people that were gifted and went into different things and then were funneled to STEM and made to go into different things. And yes, we need people in certain sectors, our physicists and our this and our that, and like into science, into technology, into math. Yes, like there is some very benign, just normal standard stuff too. But really what was happening at large was the suitable candidates that were highly suggestible, which is about 30% of our population, and then also had dissociative ability, which is under 10% of the population. If you checked all the boxes and you had the right history and were deemed suitable through all the different tests that they give you and stuff like this, including like the personality assessment test and stuff like this, which if people go looking, that was another thing. This was all CIA contracted stuff when you get down to it. But they were looking for people that could be brainwashed, and some of these same abilities, highly suggestible and disassociation, that may be conducive to just the different, STEM areas and stuff like this. There is a key category of children that were ideal candidates for being brainwashed. And what they were doing was taking a certain percent of the populace, funneling them to sub-projects from GATE and brainwashing them into sleepers. And I mean, this is what it is that we literally have Manchurian candidate level program people that are sleepers in all walks of life now. Okay. I mean, and this is all across the U.S. What really gets terrifying about this is that the people that are running these programs aren't just American patriots. Unfortunately, what this gets us to is that the people that are really managing these programs, they're managed through the clandestine services, okay? And by operational subgroups. So you have people that not only run the clandestine services, but they're part of these operational subgroups, which means like they'll have people from NRO, NSA, CIA, DIA, FBI, all these different things. And what they do is they have their own group that are in these little clubs, okay? Operational subgroup, and they'll unite the powers and the access from all these different organizations that they're officially a part of, right? Yeah. And then generally these people too, they answer directly to the NSC, the National Security Council, because it's kind of like, we'll go over it. But these people, and I'm, telling it like it is, these people that are running this, the members of the National Security Council that are over these programs tend to exclusively be either members of dragon societies or Knights of Malta and other Jesuit factions. It's important to note that Hitler's SS and all these key scientists and stuff, most of these were part of what's known as the Green Dragon Society. And then you have other dragon societies, a lot of them like from Russia, from China, Japan, black dragons, white dragons, so on and so forth. And then you have Knights of Malta and OSS, started the OSS, was known to be Knights of Malta and Jesuit factions and stuff. They started the OSS, then they started the CIA, okay? I mean, you can look into this. And then you have people such as Oliver North, Iran-Contra, cocaine smuggling, right? The people that started FEMA with the continuity of government, that were running these Rex 84 Bravo drills, meaning that they were basically detaining American citizens that were going to be dissidents in an event that caused, where they needed to activate continuity of government. Oliver North was a Knight of Malta, okay? And so were these NSC members. So again,
there's a bunch of people like in the first wave, 40s and 50s, who get looped into the advanced aerospace. There was like a pipeline where it was like there were guys in the military who were Knights of Malta, and even if you were in the military and proved to be reliable, you wouldn't get a job on advanced aerospace or nuke unless you were also a Knight of Malta, and you could get another higher up person to be like, yeah, this person's legit. Yeah. That one's a very interesting connection for sure.
Oh yeah. So you have like these conglomerates, and yes, you have the Dragon Societies and the Malta, and then Jesuit. I kind of like put that under one branch, and so like they do work together. There might be some infighting. Okay, they work together to control the people. There is some infighting over the levers of control and stuff like that, right? And again, you see some of that because there'll be higher populations in one aerospace company versus the other aerospace company. And you see like some of these, like you see a little power struggle going on behind the scenes. And you even hear that like, hey, these aerospace companies and these NGOs are kind of at war, and there's like some weird stuff going on through disclosure. Well, that's because, these people are fighting for the top of the pyramid power. But the point is that I'm getting here is that, so they've been brainwashing all these subjects, whether they go into the UAP programs, whether they become a sleeper, whether they become a spy, whether they become a Manchurian candidate and are stationed somewhere. These compartmentalized aspects, people might be directly involved and might have seen some of the programming of this, but as far as the people with command and control, the people with the ability to activate these assets, the people with the actual need to know, that have the real control and the real power and are in on these HC, these human control systems, these lists, to know the methods, to know the sources, to know where these people are stationed, how to command and control them. They have the ability to activate them. They're almost exclusively Knights of Malta or Jesuits or Dragon Societies. And again, like there's heavier populations in certain aerospace companies versus others, whether it be like, BAE Raytheon, whether it be like Lockheed and Northrop. So that's just kind of like what goes on behind the scenes. But yeah, so GATE isn't just GATE sub-project. Again, there's tons of people in GATE and all this, but so the GATE sub-projects to where they're funneling these people through, it's not just the PSI testing and all that. They were actually also testing and brainwashing a mass amount of people into the Manchurian candidate level. And that's just what it is. Like, it's super unfortunate and messed up. But this is something also that these main journalists know. Like, you hear these journalists calling for GATE people, right? And like, oh, hey, if you've had a situation with GATE, contact us and all that. They know that there's been brainwashed people. They know that there is also risks because there's third parties looking to exploit these people. Sometimes there is lists of assets, right? Like, you have these human control systems, these HCS lists. And what will happen is these are so compartmentalized, sometimes oversight passes, but the whole list of them wasn't passed off, right? Some of that has even happened recently. That's part of the whole fiasco that's playing out publicly. So what happens, though, is that some of these subjects have post-hypnotic program, like we talked earlier with the Gamma and the Omega, to where if there's unauthorized disclosures, they may experience things and even want to self-harm and stuff like that. Some of these journalists know that, and they're not willing to report all the way on what's really going on with these GATE programs, but they're getting subjects, knowing they're not going to report on it, and milking them for info with gross disregard. They take no precautions. They're giving them no warnings or pointing them towards dissociative trauma therapists so they can deal with this in a safe manner. They don't let them know what they were involved with or anything. They just milk them for info as much as they can. And at certain levels, they are in cahoots with the powers that be because they're looking to reclaim or close out. If these assets pop up and they either announce publicly, hey, I was part of GATE and I believe I was psionically tested, I'm a psionic asset, or if they contact these channels privately, like, the main people calling for GATE, the main people recruiting, some of these new initiatives from a whistleblower was known to recruit psionic assets, right? They don't warn these people. You better believe that the powers that be out there, they're monitoring those channels. So if people privately tell these channels, hey, I was a psionic asset, hey, I went through this, or if they just announce it publicly, they get themselves flagged. Okay? Yeah. Then they're evaluated for either reclamation or closeout. What does that mean? That means that, hey, if they're talking and they think they can still be controlled or used as an asset, that they're going to try to reclaim them. Meaning, hey, these activation codes, all this, we might test them, see if they're still responsive because these are layered activation codes, and they did do certain like maintenance tune-up things. They like say something, hit them with a certain symbol or a certain phrase, and then see if something's responded and if that mechanism's still active. And there's ways to diagnose this and test. And then if the people are responsive, okay, cool. Now we might try to route them to one of these like UAP gatherings, right? To where then we can get them in close proximity with some of this advanced frequency technology. And now they can do a lot remotely, and they'll essentially give them what's called a tune-up. Or sometimes they need to close them out. If these people, if their system isn't responding to the cues, right? Or if they're making unauthorized disclosures and they remember too much and their programming is failing, then they need to be closed out, which could be activating Omega programming to make these people self-harm or eliminate themselves. Or in other cases, it could be what's called EDOM, electronic dissolution of memory, where essentially they're hit with a frequency weaponry, and this can even, in worst cases, cause encephalitis, swelling of the brain, because essentially they tried to like fry the certain compartmentalized part of their brain that's holding these memories. It's like super foul. But anyways, that's what's going on massively now, is like as the technology rollout is taking place and they're kind of porting over some of these old MKUltra methods where a lot was manual and hands-on. Now the technology has advanced to where a lot of it is remote. Yes, they've created a situation to where these assets are announcing themselves publicly, they're contacting through private channels, and they're getting themselves flagged. Again, then they're evaluated, and either they're reclaimed and then put under the fold, and then, one of these aerospace companies or one of these other NGOs in conjunction with the government that manages them, essentially fleet manages all the assets, will, take them back, do maintenance, do tune-ups, do whatever, monitoring that needs to be very close with manual intervention where necessary. Or again, if they're not usable, they either shut them up and contain them and close them out, or in worst cases, they need to be actively neutralized, including with manual intervention. So it's very dangerous, unfortunately. I put out a lot of information about this too for what people can expect and how to deal with it. Because if people do find that they were part of GATE, and they believe that they were a part of more than just GATE, if they got funneled to one of these sub-projects, if they remember psionic testing, if they just have blank memory, there's things that they can expect so they can deal with it, because a lot of this programming, it will manifest as feelings and urges. So if you know what you could possibly be facing or expect, it could be a lot easier to deal with and just ride the roller coaster out. Another thing is, a lot of this programming that a lot of people receive through these GATE sub-projects it can manifest as voices, it can manifest as downloads where they instantaneously know, it can manifest as visions, as phenomena, all sorts of things. So anyways, yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole sort of deal in itself, but the GATE sub-projects funneling wasn't just for psionic testing and so on and so forth. There's also just for downright brainwashing. You might have nothing to do with phenomena. You might have nothing to do with the UAP whatsoever. There is possibility that you were just funneled to another area and you were brainwashed as a sleeper. Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, like the same people that are like, very creative and have a strong right brain, left hand, right brain, they're especially susceptible to these brainwashing, because a lot of it just goes off this, like, you need creativity and intelligence, right? So it's a lot of the right brain dominant people are very susceptible to this, which is ironically the same people, again, that are like, kind of primarily looked at for the actual psionic abilities as well. So anyways, yeah, that's the whole thing with that. But it's extremely dangerous, and it's extremely unethical and despicable. These journalists that know about this are not discussing it. And furthermore, that they're not discussing it, they're complicit in the cover-up, that they are willing to milk people for information without giving them any warning, with gross disregard for their well-being. It's criminally negligent. And then you have the people that they're working with that have their organizations that are even actively recruiting and exploiting these people. Again, knowing what they've been through. And again, might I mention this whistleblower that we talked that has had that conversation leaked with the SSC advisor, and the one that's recruiting for some of these psionic assets. He's also behind the scenes trying to manage MKUltra podcasters that have been discussing this publicly. So they're not only trying to contain the situation and the exposure, they're recruiting the assets with gross disregard for their well-being while profiting with vested interest to exploit them. So, I mean, it's really, really, really bad what's going on. And, it's shaping up that information is just going to get leaked directly. We've been trying to avoid it. But people get hurt. This is going somewhere. We don't want to re-victimize people. We don't want to create and further harm. But unfortunately, these people are continuing unchecked. So things are going to ramp up soon one way or the other. But yeah, so if you think you may have been involved with Gate or something, I encourage you to you can go on my profile on X on Twitter and just search for P5 or for warning, and it'll basically say, P5, the little 5, like, the exponent, and it's basically programmed, proper performance prevents program something for program parties, keeping them safe. I forget exactly what it's registered, but it goes through what you might face, how to deal with it, and then has some other links. And essentially, if you think you've been through this, I'm sorry, I know this is extremely long-winded, but if you think that you have been through some sort of psionic testing or worse through Gate and you have missing memory, I strongly encourage you to get educated and become aware of what you're dealing with, and then look into dissociative trauma therapy before you go announcing publicly or contacting some of these journalists or other interested parties privately, because there is risk for you being exploited or for other psychological mechanisms coming into play that could be damaging to you. So yeah, that's what it is. It's, I know, scattered and kind of long-winded, but the Gate's involved with MKUltra. Yeah,
that was probably the best and most succinct description of like where the overlap is. I had become aware of that, and then at one point, it was like when Eric and I first started talking, he was basically talking about how when he was a kid, he went to this Jesuit school that they've since torn down in Long Island. But like he was in the Gate program there, and there was a lot of the boxes. He checked a lot of the boxes, but then also said like there were like other types of programs like that all over, at least where he was growing up in Long Island, which was where he lived in Long Island was literally the epicenter of aerospace. Northrop Grumman's Bethpage plant, he lived in the neighborhood that was built to provide homes for people working at the Bethpage plant. And the Bethpage plant is where they built the lunar module and a ton of like high aerospace. But he was saying like there's a couple streets and schools that also would just be like notorious for kids would go there normal, and then they would leave there and they'd be really up in some way, like completely emotionally unstable, and again, like when we look, at least when we were looking at like the idea that we brought some of these really sinister Nazi programs over and they kind of just evaporated, a lot of them probably ended up in Long Island, just looking at what that place was, when it was, and of the couple names that are confirmed there's a ton that aren't. And, there's, I don't know, for me, like this is one of those things where it's like, it might seem out there, but when you really start thinking about it, why would they not? And I'm almost 100% certain that every other country had something similar to kind of capture the youth and create a generation of whatevers that could exceed the intellectual or physical or military capabilities of the generation that came before him. That's not so out there.
100%. And also Long Island, Milton V. Klein. Okay. That was like a psychologist contracted by the CIA, all up with the Manchurian Candidate. That's Milton, Milton Kline. And you can see there's, famous clips of him, specifically talking about, programming people and all that. So he was Long Island. And then the other thing is, all major superpower countries have this. This is not exclusive to America. One, National Defense Education Act. We have to find people that can go into our foremost, programs, and we need the top minds to stay competitive on a world stage. And then also, what do we need? We need sleeper spies for espionage. And all the countries are doing it to each other. And what's the best asset? An asset that doesn't know they're an asset. Okay. Yep. It just simply allows us unfettered access into certain places that we wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. And also kind of ensures that this doesn't fall back on us in a verifiable way. So yes, it makes perfect sense if you actually look into it and methods that work and all that. But yeah, and Long Island is a hot spot, 100%.
It's dense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think, it might be, there could maybe be some stuff that you add here too, but the idea again that us civilians, we're operating on this top level. And we like to think this is the level where things happen. In reality, it's the sub-level, the world that's occurring right around us, right in our own backyards, in our own neighborhoods that we're completely unaware of. That's where all the money is. That's where all the power is. That's where all the advanced technology comes from. And Long Island is a good example. But, your story taps into Tennessee. When I lived in Nashville, there were tons of aspects of Tennessee where I was like, this is weird. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't vibe with the general sentiment of the rest of the people that live here. Why is this happening here? So I'm interested if maybe you could kind of speak to that in the sense that how do you empower people to look wherever you are, look at your surrounding and analyze maybe there's something a little bit deeper going on here than just the general interactions, us going to our jobs and coming home and mowing our lawns. Just how do you train people to look at the world around them and be like, yeah, this does seem weird, and it's not weird for me thinking that it's weird. And when I actually look into it, it's straight up weird, and in many cases connected directly to some MKUltra.
Right. Well, it's hard, what's the mindset and all that. And I do want to say about Tennessee and Nashville, right? You got the Tennessee Valley Technology Corridor that goes from Huntsville, Alabama, all the way up to Y12 and stuff like that, right? So you got tons of stuff, but also there's stuff like that all over America. It's just, I don't know, how do people look at it? You just gotta. One is, whatever your first is, no matter what, identify your own bias, okay? How do you look at stuff, and then step outside your own perspective for a second. It's very easy for me because, obviously I grew up dissociated, right? And stuff like this. So it's easy for me to put myself in different frames of mind. But just as a thought exercise to start that, step out of your usual frame of mind, your usual perspective. And then if you recognize your own bias and what you're kind of prone to think, just for an exercise, for practice, just for fun, try to step outside that, try to do the opposite, try to look at this, argue against yourself, for example, play devil's advocate, whatever you want to do. It's just the way to look at stuff. But, yeah, I don't know. To me, it's so plain and simple. So I wouldn't even know what to tell people, other than to just, try to look at a bird's eye view of stuff. Hey, if this was what you dealt with, and then if this was what you dealt with, what would be the smart way to do it? Okay, if you're looking at hey, this is how the government says it runs and all that, well, think about, hey, if you're going to do something illegal, then maybe it's not by the book. How would this be done? And then again, you have the bits and pieces, say, try to think if you are going to remove all ethics and morals, and you don't have the typical inhibitions, you don't have the constraints, right? Try to look at it like that. You just have to practice looking at it from a different perspective, because the people that are doing this typically had a different sort of childhood and a different upbringing, to where they have systematically desensitized and stair-stepped themselves away from these moral, ethical, hurdles, these obstacles. They aren't hindered, and they don't adhere to the same guidelines that people do. So if you can really remove the inhibitions and just see stuff like if you could do absolutely anything and not worried about the consequences and all this, like how would you do it, right? And I guess you are worried about the consequences, right? So it's just like if you weren't worried about the morals and ethics, that's what it is, because still they're worried about consequences because they try to do it so they won't get caught. But yeah, it's just, you just have to step outside your perspective and just like nothing's off limits, right? No holds barred, right? So you just have to think like, hey, how could I do this as effectively as possible? If there's no morals, ethical obligations, we weren't worried about any of that. Like, let me just look, what's the smart way? And also knowing that, there's an enemy willing to do worse than you're ever willing to do, right? Yeah. So you have the justification, you have the drive. You're not a bad guy in your own mind. It's just like, hey, I have got to progress as fast as possible and ensure, that like I can have the utmost control over everybody working with me. And like, we need to do this. So how can we be as effective as possible when, we're up against an enemy that will do 10 times worse no matter what we could think of? Like, what is it, So I don't know. That's all I got. It's just all about looking at it from a different perspective, and without any constraints whatsoever.
Well, I think you nail it. Especially when there's the idea that there's an enemy that's willing to do worse than whatever the worst thing you think of. What can you justify? And in many cases, you can literally justify anything. If you, in the back of your mind, know that you're facing an enemy that does not get held up in those same moral or ethical ways, what are you going to have to justify to make sure that you can combat an enemy like that? I don't know. I'd agree. I think that's a very valuable way to look at just about anything, especially as we enter even deeper into the age of truth being dead. And, like the idea that like, what is true? Can we even tell what true is? I don't know. I think it's a crucial skill, but dude, I thank you for going on this insanely wide reaching conversation we're capping out here 3 hours. It's one of the longest ones I've done. This was super cool. Thank you for, again, agreeing to come in and do this. And like, you put a lot of glue and a lot of seemingly unrelated things. It gives it context. Even just like as I was learning about what your perspective and message was, there were so many moments where I was like, oh my God, that makes sense. A motive identifies itself. Oh my gosh. So that's why I can't support what you're doing. I cannot support it enough. And I encourage other people to. I want to give the floor to you to tell people where to check out what you're doing. And if they want to support, how to support. I will, of course, have all the links in the description for people that are interested and want to support. Please check out the socials. But tell people if you sunk them with any bit of this, where can they go to find out more?
No, I appreciate it. So, as far as social media, I'm active on X, on Twitter at Gray Area Monarch. I have a YouTube, which is, when I first came out, I was anonymous because I didn't ever want to be public, to be honest. And that's a whole thing. But I think that's either Gray Area Monarch or it might be Gray Area Operator. Again, you can find everything through my Twitter, through my X. The real important aspect is organizesafety.org. That soon will be a full-fledged website. Right now, it just brings you to the forum. And again, that's for, mainly ritual, mind control, behavioral modification, MKUltra, Monarch related survivors, but also just insiders, defectors, whistleblowers of everything. If there's anything horrible and you want to get the word out, please go there. I described, the platform at length at the beginning. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to email me at gray@organizesafety.org. Or if you have platform specific questions, you can email help@organizesafety.org. If you are trying to listen to survivors of the MKUltra, type programs and things like this of all creeds, right? At all levels, whether it be high up working with the government or whether it just be kind of like, people's family and whatnot, I would recommend that you listen to my wife's podcast. It's the Imagination Podcast. That's Emma Catherine. You can find her on X, Twitter at the Emmapreneur, and you'll find all the links there. There's a great Substack that has a summary of, it has an outline, a summary in the introduction excerpt, for every episode that comes out. And then there's also on Tuesdays, it's called like movie night, but there's like, for example, like really, really great lesser known, things that are replays, not interviews, but it's like, for example, there was a mind control series in the mid 90s that was on a radio station that just provides like the most in-depth, serious information from the experts before a lot of this got hushed up because they tamped down on this after this all came out in the mid 90s. But again, so the Emmapreneur at Twitter and X, and that's the Imagination Podcast. She's on YouTube and Rumble, and you can find over 200 survivors with full-length episodes.
She's the repository. If you want to go to the place where survivors are talking about their experiences, that you need to check out her page and podcast for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, there's different levels of people who are at different levels in this. They have different abilities to articulate, and people have different perspectives, and people may be working through stuff or not. So, it's the whole thing. But if you're trying to listen to the survivors, and connect the dots yourself, that's one place that probably has the most survivors in one place out of everywhere, but it just has a wealth of other information and knowledge. So the Emmapreneur on X and Twitter, the Imagination Podcast. And then again, if anybody has any tips, if anybody has any testimony, if anybody has any whistleblowing information, organizesafety.org.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, we're going to have to, like, this situation is currently evolving. It feels like exponentially. So at some point in the future too, when there's some more interesting connections or lines that have been drawn, we'll have you back on and we'll do another explosion here. I feel like we could have easily done like 4 or 5 3-hour podcasts. So I just know at some point in the future we'll cook another one up.
Absolutely, man. I greatly appreciate your time.
That is going to wrap us up for this one, folks. This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to check out Gray's links and stuff. They will all be in the description, and we'll catch you on the next one. See y'all.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. That's obnoxious. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. Literally no one cares. For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.